Are you good? Sorry, I've got to check with you. Okay, great. I'd like to welcome everyone out to our Laton City Council meeting this evening. The date is March 20th. So as usual, we like to go ahead and start our meeting with a prayer and a pledge, and we take turns each month. And I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to Councilmember Morris to conduct those services.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll offer an invocation, and then after, if we could all rise, and I'll repeat the Pledge of Allegiance after me. Our Father in heaven, we are grateful this evening for Thee. We are grateful to be able to be gathered here in this great city, in this community, to do the business of the city. And we're grateful for the liberties that we possess, that we've been blessed with, and for especially to be able to be self-governed. We ask that would please be with us this evening, grant us wisdom, and help us to make the right decisions for the residents of this community. We're grateful for all those who serve Laton City, our first responders, our public works, Parks and Rec, and all who help to make this our hometown. And these things I say and do in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Councilman Morris. That was a lovely prayer, and I appreciate everyone participating in the pledge as well. We'll go ahead and ask if there's any municipal announcements by anyone here that typically represents the city, either on the Parks and Rec or in other functions. Any messages we need to help get out there? So,
thank you, Mayor. Parks and Rec, this is a little ways out, but May 9th here at the amphitheater, family recreation will be family game night. It's a fun event every year, a lot of different activities going on in and around the amphitheater and the plaza here, just south of the city building here. So we'll announce it again, but coming up on May 9th. So thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Do you have any announcements you'd like to share? Anything you're aware of that's happening in the city? No? Okay. All right. Well, then let's go ahead and move on down through our agenda. Tonight, we do not have any verbal petitions. So what I'd like to do is turn the time over to our citizens and allow them to address this governing body. If you so choose, you're welcome to come up to the dais here on either side, state your name. And if you're here regarding the item that's listed on our public hearing, you can wait until that point. We'll open it up, and then we can address you all the concerns at that time. But meanwhile, if there's anything you want to share with us, you're more than welcome to do so at this time. Okay, seeing that there's none, I'll go ahead and go on to our consent items. And typically our consent items, we can actually vote or take a motion on all of the items listed and one single action by this council once they've all been presented. But I believe tonight we do want to make some adjustments here. So council, I'll entertain any adjustments you'd like to make.
Mayor, I have a potential conflict of interest on item A, as my family is the party for the purchase of that property. So I'd like to recuse myself from that. I'd like to make a motion to remove A and B, or maybe not a motion is necessary, but A and C to be handled separately. We talked about that as item C, to have a little more discussion on that. So I request that A and C be removed from consent and handled separately.
Okay, council, does anybody want to make a motion on, or a second on that, or an amendment?
Can I make a friendly amendment to also add item D to be pulled from the consent item?
Okay. So Councilman Roberts, will you accept that friendly amendment? Okay, it is. Okay. So, council, there's been a motion to have items A, C, and D dealt with separately, and I heard a second from Councilman Bloxham. So, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. With that, we'll go ahead and start. Let's see. Let's go ahead and deal with item B, because the other 3 items will be held separately, so I'll deal with those after, but before our public hearing. So with that, we'll go on to item number B. So Mr. Jackson, I believe, Steve Jackson, you're going to talk about our development guidelines and design standards?
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for letting me come tonight. Before you is item 5B, the amendment to the Development Guidelines and Design Standards Ordinance 25-07. A little bit of background on this item. The Development Guidelines and Design Standards are maintained through our engineering division of the city. They comprise 2 components, the written standards and the standard plans for public facility construction. Updates to the plans are necessary on occasion based on current code, construction standards, regulations, and other city needs. As we all know, as the legislature changes some of the state codes, we have to keep up with those and ensure that we're meeting all of those needs. So before you is this year's annual amendment to those. Some of the key updates in there is to clarify, based on some of the recent legislation that's passed, we need to clarify that we have everything in our standards and not just policy. So dead-end streets need to end in a cul-de-sac, as we discussed in the work meeting. There's some exceptions to that, as you have roads that will continue into the future, but if it's a dead-end road that never will extend, it needs to have a cul-de-sac. Some restrictions to reverse grade streets so that we don't have roads trying to go against the natural grade of the ground as well. A little bit thicker sidewalk through commercial and industrial drive approaches so that we don't have damage to our sidewalks as we work through the system. The culinary water systems, we've removed our 3/4 inch meter because of the technology advances that we have. The 3/4 inch meter and the 5/8 inch meter both flow the same amount of water, so we've consolidated that to only run 1 meter style for that. As far as the sewer, storm drain, land drain sections go, there's clarification that any casing that is required is for side lot and rear lot utilities would be between manholes as well as the rights of way, and then also some of the similar reverse grade restrictions on the utilities to avoid conflicts with depth and other problems with laterals that conflict once you start trying to do those reverse grade plans. And then our standard plans have been updated to meet all of the written standards, as well as adding a standard drive approach for where an abutting sidewalk is installed so that it meets ADA compliance. With that, the staff would recommend that the council adopt ordinance 25-07 and amend the development guidelines and design standards. Are there any questions that I can answer from the council?
Okay, council, any questions on this? Okay, seeing that there's none, then we'll go ahead and drop down to item E, which Mr. Longcraw will be presenting this item to us, which is an acceptance of the Laton City Long Range Economic Development Plan.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight we're requesting you to accept the Laton City Long Range Economic Development Plan that was submitted by our consultant, Better City and Urban Design Associates, earlier this year. That process took about a year. As you're aware, and many of you participated. The reason that we're asking for you to accept this plan is we actually have grant funding that requires it to be either adopted, approved, or accepted by the end of that term of their contract, which is June 1st. The purposes of this plan was to obtain the data, and I'll go over that in a minute. So our primary goals when we started this process was to analyze the economic feasibility of our existing town centers and urban centers as we have in our general plan to make sure they were still economically feasible according to the market. We wanted to explore the possibility of a new town center located at the south gate or the intersection of SR 193 and Hillfield Road. We wanted to assess our current retail demand, leakage, and saturation across the city. We wanted to examine opportunities for future retail, our ability to attract higher-end retail, and that came from some comments that were made from the public during the beginning of the process. We wanted to evaluate our economic position in the retail, residential, office, and industrial markets in the region, and to determine our overall economy. This is a different plan. This is not typical, and it was quite a feat by the consultant. We appreciate them, along with Wasatch Front, for providing the funding. The consultant started out with a public research or outreach process and significant research. They interviewed several stakeholders, as you can see on that list, and reviewed 18 prior studies that were completed prior to this over the past several years, as you can see on the right. They also started out with an analysis of our land use and how our city connects, basically, and the different uses across the city. They took a deep dive look at our town centers and our urban centers. During this process, they actually indicated that 2 of those town centers are probably not feasible as a town center, and that was one of the purposes of this process that we hope to find out. And that's the town center on Church and 193 in Antelope, Maine. Both of those, there's reasons for that, which if you request, I can go into depth. But they did a deep market analysis for each of these sectors, as you can see there. Overall, the analysis showed that we have a powerful, stable economy, and we are driving good employment and job opportunities, which was great to see. They also were able to show that we do have demand. We will for the next 10 years in each of those sectors. In order to implement that plan, they came up with 5 different strategies, as you see here, which including public spaces in our centers, creating pedestrian-oriented town centers, and there's a lot of reasons for that. One of those is actually to attract some of the higher-end retail that we hope to achieve. The next one is to look at some of our parking lots, areas that aren't utilized as much as they could be, to focus on workforce and development where we can, and higher density housing around our transit and retail, and that's to support the retail and the transit as well. The plan includes a where, why, how, and what for each of those sectors, so we better understand how to achieve those goals. And a lot of really good data in the back, which usually you see spread out through some of these plans, and they're hard to read. This was put together pretty well, so it's easy to read, and there's a lot of really good data in the back. And with that, staff would recommend that the City Council approve Resolution
25-11.
Yeah, sorry, I had one
That's
back
okay.
here. It's not there. So 25-11 to accept the Laton City Long Range Economic Development Plan is submitted by the consultant.
Okay.
I'm happy to answer any questions.
Council, do you have any questions on this?
One, Madam Mayor, if I might.
Sure.
Thank you for providing that, Lon. Lots and lots of information. When I saw my packet this week, I was like, this thing is massive. And I saw that big plan. It was a lot of great information, but I just had a question. So this was funded by Wasatch Front Regional Council through a grant. And then you said that it requires adoption or what? We have to give them the grant money back?
I don't know exactly, but maybe.
Okay.
Usually that's how that works.
Okay. It just seems bizarre to me. I mean, this isn't you, obviously, but
Yeah.
it just seems
Kind of
bizarre.
proof of performance.
Yeah,
They need
proof
to
of
know that we went
performance.
through it.
Could you go back to your first slide?
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. because this isn't a legislative document yet. It's just for referential
Correct.
purposes. It just seems bizarre to me that they say, here is a grant money, do this, and then you need to require the council to adopt, approve, or accept our final plan, accept all of our analysis, all of our strategies, even though it's not a legislative document. It's just bizarre to me. Am I wrong?
Well, we still have the authority to change and modify.
It just seems bizarre. It just seems weird that
We're asking
would
the council
contingent
to
that.
accept it instead of approve or adopt it for several reasons. This is a great document. There's a lot of really good information that we hope to achieve. We believe there's some more work needed. And some more analysis, some more planning before we want to attach it to the general plan or any specific ordinance.
And I understand. I'm not trying to be a squeaky wheel. It's just an interesting way of going about. Thanks for the grant money. Here's what we think you should do in your city, and you approve them or something happens. Because there's a lot of stuff in here that I think's great, and there's a lot of stuff in here that I actually don't think's what I want for Laton in the future. And so it causes me, I guess, a little pause just how they formulated that. Now, again, it's not a legislative document, so we can change it as we go. It's kind of a continuing. I mean, I think I've made comments about this organization before, which I think does great work. But there's a lot of kind of one size fits all from, what works in Salt Lake works in Davis County, and I don't think it's that way. So I just wanted to make sure that was said, at least in a public setting, that I'm really grateful. It has a lot of great information in there, and we'll be using it for referential purposes. But it is a little strange how they went about the grant funding on this.
So to be clear, it's Transportation Land Use Connection funding, which is federal, and that's the requirement. That's where the requirement's coming from. So they need something that says they completed a project. In this case, the grant was for $230,000. Our portion was just a little over $16,000 is all, which is great. And at the time, it was the largest planning grant ever provided by WFRC, so it's pretty significant. But that requirement is most likely federal.
Okay. Is there other questions?
I think I just want to make a comment. Our item does say to accept it, so even though Wasatch Front language says adopt, approve, or accept, we are being asked to accept that the report or the plan was completed, and also that it says until a future date when it may be attached to a legislative document. And to me, that means that we don't ever have to attach it to a legislative document. And so I think it's probably just worded in a way that may work for any area. So again, not necessarily a one-size-fits-all, but giving the latitude for whatever city. I'm really appreciative to Better City for the work done here, as well as UDA and Wasatch Front. Also coming into our city and looking at all of the spaces that we had and looking at the uniqueness of what we do have in the city and being able to come up with some ideas of how to better use space in different areas, based on where they are. So I do think that it was not so much a one-size-fits-all approach. I think it was just worded in a way that more cities could take advantage of the grant. And I'm grateful that we had an opportunity to have something that's this comprehensive to help us, since we do have some town centers that are in the works. And I think this is beneficial for us.
Okay. Any other comments?
And with that, I'd like to make a motion
Absolutely. I'll entertain that.
that are we adopting an ordinance or approving?
Resolution.
Well, there's
we've got
two. We
item
have
B.
consent items.
So item B.
So item B
consent
and item A.
Ordinance.
So I move that we accept the consent items that have been presented. That's item B, ordinance 25-07 for the development design guideline and design standards, and then also resolution 25-11 for the Laton City Long Range Economic Development Plan.
Okay, it's been moved in second that we adopt items B and E as presented. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Yeah, sorry, it was Clint, sorry. Okay, any opposed?
No, raise your hand.
Okay, thank you. I know Kim was asking. Okay, let's jump back up then to item number A. And I know that Councilman Roberts has asked to be excused, so we'll give him a minute, and then while that's taken place, then Ms. Joellen Grandy is actually going to present this item to this board, and it's regarding the acquisition of property for the continuation of the Case Creek Trail. Okay.
Mayor and council members, this evening I have the pleasure of introducing Resolution 2510. Laton City and DR Ventures LC propose an agreement for the acquisition of property for the continuation of the Laton City Case Creek Trail System. Sorry.
Trying to find the mouse.
In the graphic that you see on your screen, we have the Case Creek Trail, which is the green line. And our goal is to have this trail system eventually connect from the mountains all the way down to the Shorelands Preserve. In the far bottom left-hand part of the screen, you'll see the orange line, which is our West Davis Corridor Trail. Zooming in on the area that we bring forward to you this evening, the acquisition of land will allow our trail users continual access of the Case Creek Trail through the western half of the city. So if you look at the screen, basically from Dawson Street, with this last section of land that we're looking to secure, we'll be able to have a full connection, which will take trail users all the way out to the West Davis Corridor Trail and even to the Great Salt Lake Shorelands Preserve. During this process, an appraisal was completed through a licensed appraiser who identified this section of property. Just to help orient our people tonight, this is near Angel Street. We have Hill Farms that's on our on our west, and then Old Farms that would be on the east side. This appraisal was valued at $211,600. The total size of the property is 0.75 acres. A portion of this property that was desired included the creek and bank side, which in the graphic you can see is that red hashed area, which the city considered undevelopable. The city offered a revised amount of $146,220, and the property owner is willing to sell this property to the city for an agreed upon negotiated price of $178,910. This resolution, if passed, will authorize the acquisition of property for the continuation of the Case Creek Trail System, and staff recommends the council adopt Resolution 2510, authorizing the acquisition of property by negotiation to house and accommodate a trail and the attendant improvements for the continuation of the Case Creek Trail. Are there any questions?
Council, do you have any questions on this?
I have one.
Okay.
Maybe this is for you, Clint. So on another issue that we had that's been removed from the consent items, we were pretty consistent saying whatever the appraised value, that's what we'll pay. So can you give me some guidance on why there's a distinction where the appraisal was X and we came Y?
Yeah, so just as you noted, it's for less than the appraised value, and do you want to address the reasons for the why it was less than the appraised value?
Yes, it was for less than appraised value due with the bank, and almost 60% of this property that we're acquiring is the bank and the creek, and so it's not necessarily developable, and that was something that we negotiated at finding in middle grounds with the property owner at $178,910.
Any other questions? I'll make a quick comment on it. Mm-hmm. I can tell you that I have used this Case Creek Trail numerous times, and actually would go down to where you'd have to cut through the neighborhood in a dead end, and in order to connect to this trail. So to see now that you'd be able to continue it, and really it's kind of a south-west portion. I'm excited to see it get done because I love walking that creek line, and it's just a different feeling and atmosphere within the city because there are a lot of trees along there as well, and I highly encourage people to use this trail system. So that's just my own 2 cents.
Thank you.
Anything else, council? If not, I'll bring it back to you for action on item number A.
Right.
Mhm.
Madam Mayor. Well, I've never said that before.
That sounds so.
Hey, Joy.
Thank you.
And make a motion that we accept the acquisition of the property in Resolution 2510
Okay.
on Weaver Lane.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved in second that we accept item A as presented. All in favor? Wait, hold on. This is actually a consent item, but yet it's a dollar figure. Shouldn't I be doing a roll call?
Go ahead and do a roll call.
Okay. All right. Very good. I'm glad I caught myself. All right. We'll go ahead and start down here with Councilman Bloxham,
Yes.
Councilman Morris,
Aye.
Councilman Smith Edmondson. Aye. Councilman Thomas.
Aye.
Okay. There you have it. It's unanimous. We can now ask Councilman Roberts to rejoin us. With that, Steve will be back up. Okay. Okay, we'll now go on to item number C of our consent items, which Mr. Jackson is going to present this item, and it's a bid award with Page Professional Tree Service in the Cage Creek Estate area.
All right, thank you, Mayor, Council, again for the time tonight. Before you is the bid award for professional services to Page's Professional Tree Service, Resolution 25-18. This is associated with the Case Creek State Sidewalk Repair Project that we're proposing to complete in that subdivision. Resolution 2518 authorizes the execution of agreement between Laton City and Page's Professional Tree Service for the Case Creek Estate Sidewalk Repair Project. The project includes removing trees, stumps, and root systems that are currently damaging sidewalk infrastructure, and then Yarborough Construction is our contractor for the maintenance, removal, and replacement of the concrete sidewalks, ADA ramps, curbs, and gutters, and applicable. So just a little bit of the process that we went through with this bid. For professional services, the city completes that annual sidewalk maintenance project with Yarborough Construction every year. Yarborough Construction provided tree removal prices for us on a separate project, the Gordon Avenue Sidewalk project we discussed in our work meeting. But due to the number of trees and the impact of the tree removal, the city solicited pricing from arborists for professional services to remove the trees and work with Tim Yarborough and his staff to complete this project. After interviewing the arborists and discussing the project with them, receiving their pricing, and we, based on the responsiveness and capacity of the arborist to complete the work, the city has selected Page's Professional Tree Services to provide the professional services for tree and stump removal on this project. 3 bids were received, with Page's Professional Tree Services submitting the lowest responsive and responsible bid in the amount of $401,470. It will be noted that some of the optional trees will not be removed. Some of the options for the homeowners that we have since discussed with them is that they can remove their trees and then we will just grind the stumps. So likely the total cost of this project will not be that $401,000, simply because there will be some of the work that is reduced on the project as homeowners choose not to remove some of the optional trees. Staff recommends the council adopt Resolution 2518 and authorize the bid award to Page's Professional Tree Services. Authorize the city manager to execute the agreement for the Case Creek Estate Sidewalk Repair Project 2455. Are there questions that I can answer for the council?
Okay, council, I know we discussed this at length in our work meeting, and I know that there was some very good ideas that came out of that as well. So I'll now ask if you guys want to continue that deliberation on this.
We've got stuff we need to talk about. This is an agenda item we waited for. I'll make sure that we get that turn to Steve.
Okay, technically on the consent items, we do not engage with the residents or with the comments. That's usually in a public hearing. However, under the citizens' comment is when we would have entertained any comments that were necessary or that you would like to address this governing body, whether it be an item on the consent items or anything that is not. That's correct, under the citizens' comment. Excuse me. I will, under one condition, allow one representative who wants to speak on behalf of the group, that if the council agrees, then we will allow that one person to address this. In the meantime, this is an opportunity for the council to continue their deliberations on the topic and deal with the resolution at hand. So with that, council, I'll turn it back over to us. Do you have any questions or want to continue your discussion or entertain one comment on behalf of all the residents?
Madam Mayor, I think we had a great discussion in work meeting. And I don't think that there's, from my estimation, I don't feel that their inability to not know how the process works should prevent them from speaking, not just one, but if we're not opposed to hearing from, I'm not opposed as my own self hearing from whomever wants to speak, with the understanding that we have discussed this issue for about 45 minutes in the previous meeting. So just know that we want to hear you. We're not trying to tell you we don't want to hear you. That's just how the process works. So I'd be willing, if it's your meeting, to allow for that. If you consent, I'm okay hearing from the residents. We've got a lot of emails, got a lot of phone calls, got a lot of discussion points. So I think I probably know what you're going to say, but I want you to be able to say it in a public setting if you feel that's the place to be. And if that's okay with you, Mayor, I don't have any hesitation with that.
Okay. I can understand what you're saying, and I actually agree with that. However, I did say that I would engage the council on this decision. So, council, would you want to weigh in on this as well?
Sure. Yeah, I agree. Zach, let him speak, because if I'm going to make a decision, I want to hear whatever.
Very good.
I don't read very well.
Okay.
I just wanted to add, I am in agreement as well to whatever you decide as how many people time that piece. But I also would like this same courtesy to be extended to item D, because I believe that the representatives in the audience probably did not understand that they should have spoken during the citizen comment as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that one I understood. Okay. Mr. Morris, you in agreement? Mr. Roberts. Okay. All right. I love it that we have a unanimous choice here on allowing our citizens to comment. One thing I failed to mention, so again, I apologize, but typically at the beginning of the meeting when we're dealing with consent items, I make it known that we limit the comment to 3 minutes. We do have a clock up here, and I also want to emphasize that if you could, if a topic has already been discussed or a particular situation has already been shared, then please don't reshare that, but perhaps, state what else you need to add to that, okay? So with that, I'll go ahead and entertain the comments at this time.
Do we have any? Can I ask you a question?
This is technically our time. So yes, if you have a question, you're more than welcome to answer.
I got 3 minutes. Okay. I just need, we've had a great discussion but I just want to get one thing clear, and I don't have it. We're proposing that we use pages, but do they have the opportunity to opt out of that and do it themselves? I hear that, but I don't know if
as the homeowners, we have allowed them to remove their own tree. However, the grinding of the stumps and all of the roots under the sidewalk will be done by page.
By page.
Under this.
Okay, so they can have the tree removed,
They can remove it themselves. They can hire somebody else to do it if they want, as long as it's removed by the deadline that we have, which is April 1st. So it's coming up because we need our contractors to start. And
you said that they have. So is it a done deal? Who's removing and who's not?
We have received quite a few of the papers back today. So about 25% of the homeowners that were on the optional list have responded. About 29% of the required homeowners have responded.
Okay. That's all I wanted to know.
Yeah, we did.
They had opportunity of.
Yeah.
With the exception, they have opportunity to take the tree down, but not to.
But we are planning to do all the grinding and all that because it affects how the sidewalk and the infrastructure gets built out. Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Before I open it up once again, council, does anyone else have any questions or?
No, I think maybe it would be good for the residents, instead of having to hear some of the discussions that if they weren't privy to our discussions, maybe we can review kind of what we had discussed and what we had dialogued on for that amount of time. So this is a tough issue because it's an exceptional circumstance. I've been on the council for 6 years. I haven't seen anything really quite like this before. And so I know that when we first discussed this as a legislative body, that I was very concerned about the financial aspect of the tree removal, because I didn't want something that, even though it was required in ordinance, that if you have a tree and it's affecting the public infrastructure, that you have to replace it at your own cost. But still, because of the breadth of the problem, we, as a council, decided that we wanted to provide some financial assistance, and it had nothing to do with your means. It was just, if you lived in the neighborhood, you could take advantage of the 50% share. As time's gone on, we've had a lot more discussions about questions regarding procurement, which legal has answered that everything was on the up and up. We didn't have any issues legally. And so there was a discussion that we were having amongst ourselves, and potentially maybe we could just continue that conversation about whether we can maybe sever the financial considerations from the removal of the trees. I've read every email I've had. Some of them are nice, some of them aren't so nice, which is fine. It's a very important part of your life. I planted, I think, like 70 trees in my yard over the last 2 summers. So I actually don't like trees very much. If someone wanted to take mine out, I wouldn't care. And I'm being facetious because they are important, and I've driven down that. My son goes to school at Heritage Elementary. I know the area pretty well. But I also want to make sure that the city, in terms of the nearly 90,000 residents of the city, that we have a duty as elected representatives to ensure that we are being good stewards of their funds, and potentially the liability that could flow from this situation, which most of the emails and the calls and the texts that I've received have been understanding of that portion. And so one of the discussions that we had, and I just wanted to bring it out to everyone who wasn't available to see the work meeting, is that I would be in favor of allowing the city, since it's it's an exceptional circumstance. It's not a requirement that we cover the funds, but I would not be opposed if we could remain on the same timeline, but if the city were to cover the costs of the tree removal and the circumstances that go with it for those mandatory items. That would allow us to continue our same timeline, because that's what legal and engineering has said is the best. And it would remove one of the difficulties that we had, where we had a situation that I think can be distinguished from other areas in the city, where I don't want to create a precedent where the city just is ignoring its own ordinance, and we're just providing financial incentive to representatives because they sent us some mean emails. I have no interest in that. But I do want to find some way for us to maybe distinguish, if we think there is a distinction between this situation and all the other situations that I've seen in 6 years. And Alex even mentioned that this is one of the most difficult situations that he's seen in 30 years regarding this type of issue. And so to me, that shows that it is a pretty exceptional thing. And if that means that we have to kind of take some of the heartache out in terms of the financial impact of that, then I'm willing to at least discuss that as a potential option for us as a city, with the understanding that it's not setting any sort of precedent or future understanding for future residents in other areas of the city. So I just wanted to make sure that was the last thing we really discussed, and maybe if we had more discussion that we wanted to have as a council, at least according to that specific section of it, and then open it up for additional discussions with that understanding that we have had talked about that financial aspect.
Okay. Does anybody wish to add their opinion here regarding the additional financial support on behalf of the city? Oh, sorry.
I
Yes.
appreciate Councilmember Bloxon bringing this up. It's a thought I've had the last couple of days. It's been on our mind a lot. I know it's been on my mind a lot, this situation, because it's a difficult one. But I'd be supportive of that. I think it's one of my biggest concerns was the potential financial hardship of some of the families that they might have known it was coming, but the neighbors might not be fixing their sidewalks, so we'll wait. But I appreciate that, and I'd be supportive of that kind of move.
Okay. Anyone else wish to express their opinion on this?
I'm not a mathematician. Okay, so you said 29% have decided to opt out, do their own.
No. 29% responded of the people that had required trees to be removed, and about 25% of the optional tree removals have been responded to as well. So let me remind you that the required tree removal, if there is no response, it goes to option 1, which is the city will take care of it.
Sure.
The optional tree removal, if there was no response, goes to that we will not remove or touch their trees. And so we anticipated there were quite a few people that would probably say, well, if it's a required tree, option 1, why do I need to respond? And if it's a if it's a required tree and it's going to come out, then why do I need to respond? And if it's an optional tree, I don't want it to come out, then I don't need to respond. So there's kind of a middle ground there where we've heard from a few that just said that exact thing. We don't need to respond because that's the default and that's what we're doing.
It's just going to happen. Yeah. Okay. I was trying to get a figure if this was to go through, like what would be
The additional cost to the city?
what would it cost? No, I can see these, but you're talking some are going to opt out and some are going to do 50%.
So we did, if I could add to that, we had 14 of the responses say that they were going to take out their own trees so that they could save on those costs and then pay the 50% of the stump removal. And then we had 3 respondents of the optional trees that said they would remove their own optional tree and then we would grind the stumps for them, if that helps.
Okay. Did you have something more you wanted to add at this point?
Just ask Clint one question. I mean, I got a lot of emails, so I just was going through and trying to remember to ask in a public setting some of the questions that I had. One of them was in regard to any sort of takings. Obviously, this is public infrastructure, the sidewalks, and so the trees on the park strip. Is there any implication of any sort of takings with the city approaching this in a mandatory fashion?
No, I don't think so. And it's pretty well established law in the state of Utah and really any other state that municipalities have the right and authority to protect its infrastructure.
Yeah.
And there is over 100 years of case law supporting that. And frankly, if it were for that assertion to be true, that would turn it 100 years of case law on its head, would place the liability squarely on each property owner, and would be a real mess, honestly.
Okay. Well, thank you for that.
Councilman?
So in the work meeting, I had quite a bit to say. Most of my questions were answered, but for the purpose of the public meeting, and that one is public as well, but for the purposes of the meeting tonight, I do want to just have Steve kind of respond to some of the questions I had earlier. The first question that I had posed was there were a number of residents who had mentioned that they had gotten their own quotes and they could get these trees removed for much less, including a particular tree service who was willing to offer the same services for almost half of what was being quoted. And so my question was, what is preventing us as a city from getting additional quotes? I also mentioned about this Yarbrough Construction, who's not necessarily a tree company, but does also remove trees, and wondering why that one was included. And I think the response was very complete, but I think it would be helpful to provide the response to those questions in this setting. So if you'd be able to do that, Steve, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah. I'll start with the Yarbrough Construction one. As a city public works department, as we find out that we do these projects, it's always easier to work with one contractor than multiple contractors. So as Yarbrough is our construction contractor for our sidewalk repair and replacement project, they do provide tree removal services for us on a much smaller scale. And so we feel like it is appropriate to ask them if this is something they can do. Obviously, as you see their price, it was not something that we wanted to pursue simply because we knew that with the scale of this project, that those trees we felt like with a professional tree service could come down in price. And so that was kind of the initial discussion about Yarbrough. Is we think the world of them as a contractor, and even when they remove trees for us, they do a great job, but the size and scope of this project is a little bit outside their wheelhouse as far as after we found out the scale of what's going on here. As far as the costs that have been thrown around from another tree service that is in the area, we spoke extensively with them after the public or the meeting we had with the homeowners on Thursday last week. Asked them all the same questions that we asked of Pages and Yines as we talked through that. We evaluate their company. We look at how much they have insurance coverage for. We look at the size of their employee base, what materials, what equipment they have, all of those things to determine whether or not the size and the scope of the project is appropriate for that company. As much as Giants is a great company, as we found out, they don't have the same manpower that Pages has. And so as we evaluated that, and we evaluated this other company that has kind of tried to enter the fray here, we've determined that they don't have the same manpower that Pages has. They don't have the ability to complete the same amount of work. The standards and the specs that they were providing the quotes on were not the same. Many of the stump removal quotes were for much more shallow of a depth. They wouldn't remove all of the roots and all of the stumps that were in the area. Our requirement was that the stumps be removed completely, so that if a homeowner wanted to replant a tree in the exact same spot, they could. That obviously adds cost and risk to the contract. And so overall, as we evaluated the other contractor who provided some estimates to the homeowners out there, it was determined that they weren't bidding on the same specs and the same standards that we were looking for. And ultimately, they aren't a big enough company to be able to do what we need to do. And that's why we've selected Pages to receive our recommendation to do this project, is simply because of their responsiveness and their ability to work and complete the project in tandem with Yarbrough Construction throughout the project. Does that answer the question?
That does. Thank you. And then another question that kind of piggybacks on Councilmember Dave is there have been numerous residents who have stated that they would have liked or would still like the opportunity to take care of this on their own. And so when we discussed this in the work meeting, I asked about that specifically. Is there an opportunity to set a set date and give the residents a chance to take care of that on their own? And you responded very specifically, in clarifying maybe what I was asking or what I was presuming. And so I would like you to respond to that as well, please.
Yeah, so I think the short answer to that is no. As we've looked at this project, at the size and scope of the project, both Yarborough Construction and Pages have indicated that because of the early season that we're trying to get this done in, that they have the schedule to take care of that. If we take and delay this project a couple months or 3 months or whatever, then all of their windows that they would have open for construction are gone, and so these prices would not hold for that for us, and so we would end up having to go and increase the prices in order to have it be taken care of that way. The other thing I pointed out in the work meeting was that the homeowners who have asked us to allow them to fix the sidewalk on their own have consistently told us that the reason they want to do that is so that they don't have to remove their trees. And we've tried to explain multiple times that if a permit was issued for the sidewalk repair, that the condition of that permit would be that the tree be removed because it's damaging the sidewalk. And so we don't feel like that is an effective method for us to go down that road if the whole point of them not wanting to allow us to take care of this project is simply so they don't remove the tree, but the tree is the problem that we're trying to resolve and take care of.
And the reason for that is because if they are just replacing the sidewalk without removing the tree, then the sidewalk will have to be replaced again in another however many years.
We've seen multiple times, as you saw in some of the other pictures we presented in the previous work meeting, that as you try and I'll call it a Band-Aid, you take the sidewalk out and then you shave or grind roots or whatever, that without fail, the trees come back and they damage the sidewalk in the future. And so we're looking for a permanent solution to this issue that we're having, and that is that the tree be removed and then an appropriate tree for the park strip be replanted, whether it's in the park strip or behind the sidewalk, per our ordinances that allow that.
Thanks.
And Steve, you mentioned that if we were to say hit the reset button, start from scratch, put it out to bid again. You can't, obviously you're not a fortune teller, you can't predict the future, but you indicated that you believe that the pricing would be substantially higher once this goes out to bid for another time. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe it would be. At this point in the season, most contractors have filled up their schedules by now, and so in order for us to take this out to bid now and expect it to be done within a relatively short time frame, even 3 months, we will see, I believe, substantially higher prices from whoever it would be. The difficult part also is that these are now public numbers that have been out there, and so it's really difficult for us to have a fair bid with Pages even, and all the due diligence they've done now that their number is out there.
Yeah, that was my follow-up question. You have now a second bid process where you have what you're trying to avoid when you have the bidding process, so that you have options available that are kind of blind. And then to piggyback on the timing issue, Clint, you mentioned that we have ADA requirements as a city, and that we have major liability problems with that. In addition to, obviously, we want people to be able to access the sidewalks and not get injured. But from a legal standpoint, that there is a increased liability potential with having identified a particular area of our city that has major issues, and that if the longer we wait on this type of remedy, the more chance we have to have issues with liability. Is that right?
Correct.
Anything else?
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate all the work that's gone on all the way back to back last summer and in November when you started working with us. We're charged with health, safety, and welfare of residents of Laton, and I'm intrigued by the idea of just taking care of this, the required tree removal that your team have deemed the ones that have to go. We need to be safe. We have public hearings and public meetings, and we'll be accused of, it just is what it is, that if we approve this or that people are going to be injured or die, and the kids, I mean, you can imagine what's said. And here's a case where we don't want anybody to be injured here. There's something that we're looking at going, yeah, this is a danger. This is, and we talked about it in the work meeting being imminent and an emergency. And so what would you do in an emergency? You'd fix it. We should fix it. And I think it was generous, the idea of sharing. And maybe in this instance, maybe we should flesh this out more as we discuss it. But the optional trees, you're not saying that they're optional, that are still not liability there if something happens. It's just those are the ones that have been deemed optional. I don't, if that's okay to say or not, but those, it seems like those trees go back into the pool of, you go around and they're back into the surveying of the rest of the sidewalks of the city. They just aren't part of this anymore. So I don't know if you thought about that or want to discuss that further, but I like the idea of, okay, take the financial part out of it. Let's just take care of this. Oh.
Well, if I could, there were 9 respondents that did want to remove the optional trees at the 50-50 split. And then, like I mentioned before, 3 wanted to remove the tree and then have the stump ground and removed. So just keeping that in mind, that there are some homeowners that do want the optional tree removed so that they don't need to deal with this in the future.
Okay, there's one more item that I heard in the work meeting that you need to speak to, and that was the actual process of soliciting the bids. Now, the reason why you went about the way you did is because this is a professional service. So do you want to just speak to that so people understand why you did this, the process that you did versus an open public RFP process?
Yeah, this is a little bit of a unique situation with our maintenance contract with Yarbrough Construction. As we proceed every year with that project, we had to figure out a way to mesh the two together, right? The tree services and the concrete are not 2 independent projects. If we did that, then we would have a tree contractor that would come through the neighborhood, tear the entire neighborhood up, then we'd have to have Yarbrough come to the neighborhood, remove all the sidewalk, and then a tree company come back and do all of that. And so the intent was that we needed professional services to allow us to work in tandem with Yarbrough Construction and Pages to be able to work through the area methodically so that they can work in small work zones, but work in tandem to be able to take care of this in a way that will not be as large of an impact as it would be if we had to come in multiple times with multiple phases of the contract. So the professional services solicitation was a way to allow us to find somebody that could work with our existing contractor with Yarbrough Construction to complete the project the way it needs to be completed, because really this is a sidewalk repair project for public safety purposes, and the tree removal is ancillary to that and an appendage to that. So,
which makes it then compliant with any type of state
Can I just add to that, Mayor?
process? Sure.
Yeah, so the other reason being, as was just expressed, that this presents an imminent danger to our citizens and their visitors and anybody that uses those sidewalks. It presents a imminent danger to the liability to the city for complying with the Americans with Disability Act. And then just a clarification, you used the terms open and public. This is still an open and public process. It's on the screen here. There's a public body here. You're going to take public comment. It is a very open and public process still.
Okay. All right. Council, do you have any more questions? I do know that there was one more item that I think that many of us read in the emails that were sent to us as well, and that was the fact that they would be required to replace a tree back in the park strip. However, with our Zeroscape ordinance, that is, could you speak to the requirements then?
Yeah, so the understanding that we have is our ordinance does allow them to meet the standard that was in place when the subdivision was approved and constructed. So that's where we've given them the option. The original approval was 2 trees per frontage, or they can meet the new ordinance, which is 1 tree for every 30, 40 feet. But then also the new ordinance also allows for the trees to be planted behind the sidewalk within 10 feet. There is some discussion Mr. Drake and I have had about whether or not the CCRs for the subdivision would allow that to be behind the sidewalk, but the city ordinance would allow that to be behind the sidewalk. And so that would be an issue if the HOA felt like they wanted to enforce it in the park strip. They might be able to do that. And that's one of the reasons why we required Pages to grind the stumps as deep as we're going to require that, is so that those trees can be replanted in the exact same spot if needed, or if the homeowners have chosen to do that.
Okay, very good. Council, do you have any other comments?
Yeah, Mayor. Thanks to staff, to Public Works, legal. I started today with about 20 questions on this and had a couple productive conversations, which I appreciate, but also a productive meeting before this. I still have one concern that I brought up a couple weeks ago at our last meeting that hasn't been addressed. I kind of had a different perspective after visiting the subdivision and going around, looking at some trees that were said to be required to be removed. So can you talk a little bit about the standards to make something required, whether it's just sidewalk lift, damage to curb, or just tree species?
So the tree species was not taken into consideration at all for the requirement to be removed. The optional trees, that was where the arborist helped us to say, is this a potential in the next 5 years or beyond? And so that would be the only time that species was ever really considered. As far as the standards that we looked at, a 1/4 inch lift on the sidewalk or separation vertically is the standard that we use. There are a few places where the sidewalk is starting to be lifted and buckled, but it hasn't quite fully shifted, but it's clear and obvious that there's a tree root underneath there that's going to, or has damaged. A buckling sidewalk is still a damaging sidewalk, but it's the current damage that's being done to the sidewalk that we're trying to eliminate, and that's where the requirement came in, that if the sidewalk is currently being damaged and the infrastructure is being damaged, the curb gutter, that's when it became a required tree. Again, the optional trees were ones that weren't causing damage, but were potentially identified that way, and that's where we've tried to stress that they are optional. The understanding is that you can leave them. However, this is not, in 5 years, we're coming back and we're doing the same project again. If it does damage the sidewalks, then it would be the homeowner's responsibility to fix the sidewalk, but also remove the tree.
Okay. Thank you. That's good clarification, especially on the species. I will just say that I do have concerns that minimal damage, minimal lifting to the sidewalk warrants a tree removal. But now with the other things we've talked about tonight, it makes it even a tougher decision. So I'm happy to hear from the public, Mayor, if everyone else.
It's good. Okay. All right. I appreciate everyone deliberating, because that was the intent here and the purpose of the consent item, so that you can openly discuss these items so that the public understands where you feel. At this time, we will go ahead and open it up for public comment on this. I think that one thing that if you guys would please take into consideration, as you can see, this governing body is definitely trying to mitigate this issue and willing to contribute additional financing towards this. So I think that should be taken into considerations on your comments here. And once again, I'd say you're welcome to come up to the podium. Make sure you state your name, though. So now I'll turn the time over to you. Yeah, you can go. So what we're doing is we're allowing each one of you to go. Whoever wants to speak is welcome to speak. We will incorporate our time limit. And I asked is that if a topic or a situation has already been expressed, then if you could, please not duplicate it. But, the time's now yours.
After listening to this, there's really, I can condense this. The logic that we have to
Hang on.
combat.
I don't want to interrupt you, but you
Randy
need to state your name. Okay.
Randy Herget.
Okay, thank you.
There's no point in me talking unless we can figure out or resolve the logic. The logic is that the trees, we want choice. We want to repair the sidewalk at our own cost. We're required to. Your letter said it's our expense. We can't do that unless we remove the tree, that stipulation. It begs the question, why do we pave roads? We know we're going to dig them up. They're going to get potholes. They're going to dig up for utilities. They're going to sink for whatever reason. What is so special about a sidewalk that we can't repair it again? I will repair it at my own expense. I can save you guys hundreds of thousands of dollars if you'll let us keep the trees and pay for the sidewalk ourselves. Problem solved. But if we can't get past the logic of it could raise again, no point talking anymore. That's my 2 cents.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Ashley Simmons. Thank you for letting us speak. You know that he knows that I've been talking to the property ombudsman, and that I've requested mediation on this matter. After reviewing the documentation that I submitted of the current plan, the ombudsman identified 3 significant property rights concerns that she referred to as red flag concerns. Number 1, all residents were required to install specific trees in the park strip. We have given you guys the original documents from 1998 showing that. Number 2, many residents requested permits to fix their sidewalks themselves at their own cost and were denied those permits. We have many emails showing we were denied permits. Number 3, many residents are currently being required to remove trees when their sidewalk is currently up to code. Councilman Morris says this is an emergency because it is dangerous. But the other council people have come to our neighborhood and know that that is not the case for a lot of these trees. A lot of these trees are currently up to code and are still being required to be removed. As it stands, this plan will infringe on our property rights and lead to unnecessary costs to homeowners and removal of their trees, some of which are valued between $500 to $5,000. Some of these trees are absolutely worth $5,000 each. That is not in the best interest of Laton City. I recognize your efforts have gone into developing this and coordinating this plan, and I understand your desire to move forward with it. I believe there is a way to move forward with this plan without violating our property rights, and that would be allowing residents the right to opt out of this plan. You could still go forward on the timeline, but let us opt out and fix our sidewalks at our own cost. And to be given permits for that. I talked to an additional property rights ombudsman, and he pointed out that your refusal to grant sidewalk repair permits unless a tree is removed, it violates homeowners' rights to a permit. And he says homeowners should have the right to repair sidewalks in the most cost-effective and least intrusive manner possible, provided that their repair meets code. That is all that you guys should ensure, that our repair meets code. The city should respect a homeowner's right to address their sidewalk issue as long as it complies with code. He also pointed out that the city's concern about future sidewalk damage from tree roots is not a code issue. City council members and mayor, I ask you to uphold the values of Laton City and allow residents like myself the right to opt out of this plan and fix our sidewalks at our own cost, maintain them, and keep them up to code at our own cost as code dictates. This is a property rights issue. I know Councilman Morris talks about how important property rights are to him on his bio. I know a lot of you guys care about property rights, and we ask you today that you will demonstrate that care by giving us the right to opt out of your plan. Thank you for your time.
Next.
My name is Gretchen Thomas, and I need my glasses. My comments are on seeking a more permanent solution, seeking for the most permanent solution so we don't have to do anything with the sidewalks again. This is like spraying my lawn with Roundup so I won't have to mow it every week because it keeps encroaching on the pavement stones. If it's dead, I'll never have to mow it again. But then I don't enjoy the benefits and privileges that a lawn provides. The same is true for trees. They provide benefits and privileges to our community. Shade, safe nesting for birds, reduces the CO2, refreshing the air, bringing us joy throughout each season, new spring blossoms, flourishing green leaves throughout the summer, and fall colors. Many of us are willing to mow the lawn every 5 years or so for these benefits. We are willing and able to participate in the effort to maintain a healthy, balanced relationship between our sidewalks and our trees now that our city leadership has instructed us that this needs to happen. We're even willing to add new sod, this is like the metaphor, or reseed a lawn to retain the benefits of nature that nature offers us. This is like updating portions of concrete when needed throughout the years. When we're dealing with nature and all of its benefits, we are dealing with responsibilities that are ongoing, but not beyond our ability and willingness to do, especially for many of us who value those benefits so much. So again, we want the option to opt out so we can bring the sidewalks up to code ourselves by a certain date. I have pictures of Salt Lake. I was there last week, and I saw how they were repairing their sidewalks, so I just took pictures. Can I pass it? Mm-hmm. You're welcome to. And so that, I just want to say that we wanted to be a part of this process. We wanted to be a part of the decision process when it first started. And when you first introduced it to us, we didn't know. So we suddenly got slapped on the face with this situation. And now we're willing to step up and do it. There have been questions in the past, like, why didn't you do it before? You know, you had all the time to do it before and get your sidewalks. You saw what they were doing. But I know myself and others, we just weren't aware that this was something that we should do. And so now we're aware of it. We're willing to contribute our funds. Many of us, some of us aren't, right? Some of us like your plan. But many of us, and it may be few enough, that it doesn't impact this a ton. So that maybe just allow them to fix their sidewalks themselves, literally. And sometimes, I mean, yeah, you're right, 1/4 of an inch. But can we not shave those ones down? Can we not have a merciful process instead of total and complete justice, nuke it all? That's the solution, nuke it all. And I understand that you're saying this is a safety hazard and all that. It has been for 25 years. That said, I know it's a safety hazard, but can we have maybe some exceptions, some case-by-case situations given to us? I don't think that's going to be a ton of people. Mm-hmm. And that's all I need to say.
Okay, thank you. Okay, is there anyone else that wishes to speak on our trees? If not, I'll bring it back to the council and ask for action here. See how you guys want to go about this. And certainly if you feel like you need additional deliberation, I'm willing to allow that as well. But understand, I think at this point, it's the deliberation is amongst you and that we would not re-entertain the residents, if that's okay. So.
May I? Sure. So I did want to address one thing, Ashley, that you mentioned, that the city required residents to install those trees. And when that subdivision was developed, that was, from my knowledge, required by the developer. And the developer is the one who did that. So that was not the city requiring that at the time. So I don't believe that that was something that the city required residents to do. And I do know that there's been some, I don't want to say disagreement because I don't know if that's the right word, but differences with what the CCNRs require versus what the city requires. And so there was a little bit of miscommunication on that, that I did just want to bring that point out. But to Councilman Roberts' comment earlier, we walked out together and with Mayor Petro, with Ashley, and I do still agree that there are some of those sidewalks that seem like the minimal damage is not even minimal. It's negligible almost. You don't see it. None of us are sidewalk folks. We don't create them. We don't build them. We don't repair them. But we all have children and have had children who run and play and jump and do all of the things that we all do. And they fall when they fall, and we fix their boo-boo and they keep moving. I know that there is a timeline. I am very aware and sensitive to the season that we're in and needing to have these things done quickly. I would still wonder if there were an option for some of those trees that are clearly mature, because there are plenty in the neighborhood that are clearly mature, but for those where the trees are to full growth already and the sidewalk lift or damage is very negligible, I would wonder and be willing to ask if we could do something different for just those trees. Like if it's not a whole lot, I don't know how many of these 76 or these 82, probably the 82s because the medium ones still may be growing, but I don't know how many of those on this required tree removal list would have sidewalks that meet that requirement, and then allowing the residents to repair those. And if they do want to continuously repair them every 5 years or however often it comes back up on the list, that is something that I'm not opposed to. Again, I understand all sides because this is a tough thing, but I just think for me personally, if I had a mature tree, I know some of those trees, like those honey locusts, are huge. So it is just unfortunate that those were put in the park strip to begin with, but they're there. But there are some other trees in the neighborhood where the sidewalk lift may not even be the 0.25. I don't know. But if there were some other option to just review one last time and say, well, are there maybe 10 of these that we really don't need to look at, or maybe those are moved to the optional so that in another 5 years, if they get, if they get bad, that then the homeowner is responsible for the entire piece of it. But that's the only thing that I still have pause about and concern about. And again, I understand I'm not a lawyer, so I get the legal piece, and people getting hurt, which none of us want. But that is the tough part. Okay.
Yeah. Clint, I have a question. So let's assume someone lives in my neighborhood, so I don't live in this Case Creek Estates, and I have a big tree and it's blowing up the sidewalk, and city staff go by and say, Zach, you've got a tree, it's infringing on public infrastructure. They're going to give me can you walk me through what, the process by which I would be required to pay, timelines, costs? Just maybe walk me through something outside of Case Creek Estates if we were to enforce that.
Yeah, so it would come It could come in multiple ways. It could be a city employee that sees it. It could be a complaint from a neighbor or somebody that just passed through. We would receive the complaint, investigate it, provide a notice, informing the homeowner that there was a violation of city code and all these things that we've talked about. Give a timeline to have that issue eliminated. And if it wasn't, then it gets referred to our prosecutor's office.
Okay. So in that, what's the typical timeline?
It's honestly been a while. Weston might maybe be able to answer that better than me or Steve. I would guess 14 days. It's been a while since I've looked at one of those.
I mean, I put you on the spot.
14 days.
I'm really trying to get to the idea that that was brought up about kind of a case-by-case approach.
Yeah.
And why that is beneficial and why you don't want to take this heavy-handed, don't take the machete when you can use a scalpel kind of idea. So let's say we give that the wins the day, okay? And we say it's just case by case. How would we as a city, and this is not a rhetorical question, I want to know, how would we as a city enforce that if there are that many? And would the notices come and say, you have to remove the tree as well? Or would the notice come and say, you just have to take care of the sidewalk?
The notice would be you have to remove the tree, you have to take care of the sidewalk, it's damaging infrastructure, and here's the timeline.
Okay, because there's kind of an assumption that's being made in some of the comments that I received through email, that is, it's just a sidewalk issue, and that in any other area of the city, it would just be a sidewalk issue. But what you're saying is, whether it's in Case Creek Estates or whether it's in my neighborhood or it's in the mayor's neighborhood, that the issue is the sidewalk is public infrastructure, it is harmed, and that harm is coming from the tree. And
Correct.
So if the resident owner, if it was Mayor Petro, were to fix the sidewalk in that situation, they would be required to remove the tree.
To eliminate the, for lack of a better term, the root of the problem.
Okay. And that makes sense because a lot of the ideas and the hypotheticals that are brought up are all based on, I just want to fix the sidewalk. And they're never wanting to remove the tree. But what you're saying is those two things are, you can't sever those, that they are interchangeable. That if there's a sidewalk issue and that there's a big tree, that you're going to say that the tree needs to come out too for it to become into compliance, and they would have to pay for both.
Correct.
Okay.
And again, that's all based in a city or municipality's fundamental right to maintain and protect its infrastructure.
Yeah. So one of the comments was, someone comes up and you don't want to the future problems are not what we should be worried about, but it's not necessarily a future problem. It's that grinding it, making the sidewalk right, that doesn't actually address what the ordinance requires.
Correct.
Right? Okay. And the reason I'm asking these is just it's tough because I understand some of the concerns. I do. I get it. Because we as a city, we don't take these drastic, big, heavy-handed approaches. We haven't done that since I've been here. And so if there was any other way that we could make this a case-by-case basis, I would hope that we would have gone to any sort of eventuality for that. But what both legal and engineering are saying is that there is no other option other than taking the trees out. That we can't meet our duties under the law without that. And that's why the idea that we are unlawfully denying permits is not founded, because the reason you're not allowing the permit is because the permit would require you to take out a tree, not just in Case Creek Estates, but anywhere else in the city if it was having sidewalk issues.
Correct. And an important principle to recognize here, that the term property rights has been expressed here, and it's an important thing, and it's a fundamental part of our society. The city also has property rights here. And that's exactly what the city is exercising, is its property rights, is to exercise its authority to protect and maintain infrastructure, to make it accessible to the public, to make it safe to the public, and to protect our citizens and their visitors from injury and the city from liability.
Is that going to be your question?
I was just gonna, yeah, so thank you for that. Talking with the property ombudsman's office, how does that process go? Did you know that was happening?
Yeah, so just a clarification, I don't comment on the nature of it in public meetings, but yes, we have received a notice from the property rights ombudsman office. Just to be clear, what was described here is not necessarily an opinion or an identification of what they believe is the law or the issue. It's a recitation from one side of, this is what we've been told, is this correct? So we're working through that process right now. It's not even, we don't even know where that will go at this point, or anywhere, if the property rights ombudsman will even take it.
Okay.
I will tell you, we've reached out to them several times and just have not been able to. They do a lot of mediation and things like that, and so it's very hard to get hold of them. We've had some discussions with them, but nothing final, other than they're just reviewing whether or not to even take it.
Okay.
They might be just going around in circles here, but I do want to echo Councilmember Smith Edmondson's concern, I guess, that some of these trees that I've seen have very minimal sidewalk disruption, curb and gutter disruption, and I think being out of code, being out of compliance doesn't necessarily require removal of tree. It requires fixing the problem, fixing the sidewalk, but I don't know that I fully support removing that tree if it's really minimally invasive. And I think, I'm not an arborist, but I love trees. And it's tough to see. I've mentioned it before. My kids play in this neighborhood. I pick them up all the time from friends, and it's amazing. It's incredible. But I'm fully supportive of removing trees that raise the sidewalk 4 inches, and you can see the underneath side of the concrete. This makes this single vote really difficult tonight for that reason. I'd love to see a different approach, maybe revisiting the trees that are required. But I don't want to hamper the timeline as well, because I know that's important. I know there's a big problem that needs to be fixed, but there's also minimal problems that don't need to be as invasive to the neighborhood.
Okay. Councilman Morrison?
Yeah, thank you. Could we hear from Steve? I mean, we've all said that we're not tree experts, and he was the one that he made the determination. Would that be okay?
Absolutely. Steve, would you mind coming up and addressing the concerns regarding the must remove versus optional, or what some of us feel like is questionable? Is it possible to go back through and re-identify these trees, I think is what they're asking as well. So do you want to address all those
help me
issues?
understand what the question
I'm asking your process, the 5, 76, and 82. I think you've explained it many times. And so talk about the raising of the sidewalk, or where there's negligible, what's the determination?
So as we went through the neighborhood, the direction that we were given and that we've taken is that we need to fix all of the sidewalk trip hazards that are there. And I know that there's some disagreement on whether or not a 1/4 inch is enough to justify that or not. But as we're going through the subdivision, it's very difficult for us to say, hey, only the 4 inches or bigger is the ones that only have to go, and the other ones are kind of on the edge. And so we've had to say, this is what our standard was that we evaluated this by, and as we moved through the subdivision, we said, is this damaging the sidewalk or is it not? And so that's the approach that we took as we moved through the subdivision and identified all of the damage that has been done by the trees. And so it's a little difficult for us to go back and say, well, I guess this one is, where do we stop with that? Do we move the line and say, okay, anything under an inch gets to stay? Do we pick a half inch? Do we pick, an inch and a half? But what's clear from our experience over time, and as we've mentioned, all of the other, fixes that people want us to do, like shaving the sidewalk or grinding the sidewalk, those have all proven to be very, very ineffective in the way that they fix the sidewalk, because the sidewalk just keeps moving. And I know we're talking about mature trees and things like that, but some of these trees, even though they look mature, you look at the scientific data on them, they still don't reach full maturity for almost 40 years. And so we're not even, there yet as far as some of these go. And so that's where we said if it's damaging the sidewalk, they need to come out. The arborist helped us identify what would be considered a small, medium, and a large tree based on the price to get them removed. But at the end of the day, it was, is it damaging the sidewalk or not? And that's what we were instructed to evaluate and find out how much damage was being done to the sidewalks. Does that help answer your question?
Thanks, Steve, for all your work on this. I do have a couple of questions. Let's say that you've made an indication that, and you're trying to use I'm guessing, tell me, you can correct me if I'm wrong, you're using an objective standard of what our code is, so you know what is out of code and what's not, instead of trying to guess, I think this one's a hazard and this one's not. You just say, if it's out of code, then obviously it's being damaged by the tree.
Mm-hmm.
Let's assume that some property owner just didn't agree with that. Let's say that they said, no, there's something else going on. It's not my tree that's doing it. Just assume that. What would they have any sort of remedy in trying to, fighting that, and that determination that's made by the engineering department? Meaning that, because I am receptive of some of the discussions about property rights. I mean, they are, when you say, oh, you're this much over and now this, 30-foot tree's gone, that's a pretty big, final, right? There's a lot of finality to that.
Yeah.
And so I was just curious if there's anything in our ordinance or anything in the discussions where, not that they have a second opinion, or is it just you as the engineer that, and this isn't saying it's bad, the engineering department just says it's not in code. So if it's not in code, then we're not going to permit it to continue, and it's a hazard for legal purposes. And I know that it's tough to take out a 30-foot tree, but that's just the way it has to be.
I would say that we have had numerous discussions with homeowners. We have had multiple reach out to us. We've had multiple staff from our engineering department go out and discuss and explain why that particular tree or that particular location was identified. And so we've tried to be as receptive to that as we can. As far as, if there's an official appeals process, I don't know, Clint or Alex, if there was any kind of code that would require that kind of an appeal. I think that my understanding is that the Public Works Department, our job is to take care of the infrastructure, and so it's kind of our final determination as to whether or not there's damage to the sidewalk. And so we've tried to be as receptive and as open as we can with people as we talk to them, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of argument of, well, mine's not as bad as theirs, and so why should I do that? And we're having a hard time keeping the focus on the sidewalk needs to be repaired for the safety and health and welfare of the community. And unfortunately, if we don't take care of the problem, then we can't take care of the sidewalk. And there's other extenuating circumstances where when you start to try and save the tree by cutting the roots, then you potentially open that tree up to root rot and some other diseases and things like that. And then I think Clint could talk a lot to the case law behind that if we've cut the tree and done something to the tree and then something happens to that, then we could be liable for that as well. And so we're trying to be as consistent as we can to be able to fix the problem in the entire subdivision. But unfortunately, some of these trees just need to go.
My last question was, we have this in front of us as an authorization to accept a bid award. I know we have timelines. We talked about those timelines. How is there any leeway, or what's Page's professional tree services timeline for this? And we've had a lot of discussion today. I mean, this is the first time that we've been able to discuss it in a public setting and with all of us here, which is one of the reasons why we don't go walk with three or more council members, right? We can't be in the same place, all three of us, and discuss matters of the city. But that's what this meeting's for. And so my question for engineering is, what is the timeline? Is this something that we could have additional discussions on coming up to our next meeting, or is it something that you're telling us we have to decide tonight?
So the timeline is that we're anticipating delivering project notices on Monday of next week, because the contractors are proposing to call in their blue stakes and have the blue staking company. Again, they're coordinating under the law. They both have to have their own blue stake markings, but it seems ironic that you would call in blue stakes and then have them come back out and paint the same lines that they just did. So they're coordinating that to be able to start the blue staking process next week, and then they're anticipating starting the week of the 1st of April. So delaying this until your next meeting would delay this another probably 3 or 4 weeks as far as getting that done. And like I've said before, the contractors have both blocked out this window for us to be able to take care of this project as efficiently and as effectively as they can.
I lied. I have one more. Are there contingencies in the contract if we were to push this, that they could charge us more in terms of their bid amount? Because they had, I mean, we've done that before where, if something happens and we're the problem, that we potentially could pay more. Is that a situation we could be at risk with here?
I believe there could be those issues there. They could look at it as a breach of contract or something where we've been representing that our anticipated start dates are April 1st.
But, on the other side of things, we are a public body and we haven't decided that we're moving that direction yet. So if they want to try to sue us for breach of contract that hasn't even been signed, I'd like to have them try it.
Again, that's where if we sign this and then delay it or something like that.
That's why I'm asking if there's a way for us to table it, if that's an option. So thank you.
Okay, good questions.
Can you explain, Steve, what you said that you would be expecting them to do the first week of April if this were signed tonight?
So they're going to start blue staking. They have to call in their blue stakes and have the company that marks all of the utilities and things that are in the park strip and whatnot. And so that has to be done and that has to clear. Usually they have like 48 hours or 72 hours to get that done. But then as far as the starting process, they would start saw cutting the sidewalks. And in that next week before the first week of April, we would be marking which trees need to be removed under the agreements that people have submitted and whatnot. But they would start saw cutting the sidewalks, and then they would begin the removal process of the trees and the rolling work zone that the contractor has for the sidewalks, and then the grinding, and then the replacement of the sidewalks.
So you said saw cutting?
Yeah, so they bring a saw out and they cut the panels of the sidewalk so that they don't, if you start pulling on one and they're connected still, then they pull others. So he takes a really good look at it, and he saw cuts every one of the panels so that he doesn't break any more sidewalk than he has to in order to fix the problems.
Okay. So the reason I'm asking that is just because spring break starts on the 31st of March.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know we've talked also in the past about this project and the timelines and, not wanting to wait until summer because kids will be out, but they also will be out that week. Mm-hmm. And so just thinking about what specifically is expected to be done that week when kids will be there. Mm-hmm. I mean, some may be on vacation, but many probably will be vacationing in the streets with their friends. So that's something. And you also mentioned that during the week before that you all would be going back out and looking at the trees again to mark which ones and whatnot. And I'm just wondering if during that time there would be some opportunity to review those trees again with the sidewalk lift. And I know the discussion's already been had about any damage, etc. But I still, again, have a slight difference of opinion on that piece when it comes to some of those, point 0.25 less, 0.25 and less, because I do know that at the meeting last week you mentioned any damage, whether it was 0.25 lift or not, but you said any damage to the sidewalk was why some of those trees were on the list. I was looking for the code and I couldn't find it specifically where it mentioned that. So if the 0.25 is something that that our department has determined that this is what we're going to use as damage, then I do think that there may be some opportunity there to shift that. I don't want you to feel like it's you going back on your word and saying, oh, well, now we're going to do this. As Alex likes to represent often, you can blame him. Right? That's what he says. But the same thing for us. If we, as a body, said, hey, we just really don't feel good about this, and we would like that size limit to be 0.5 instead of 0.25 or whatever, that would be on us as a body who would have agreed to that. And so that would not be reflecting on you and your staff, on Alex, on any of the city, saying that you didn't know what you were doing, because we have already articulated that we are not concrete experts or arborists or lawyers, with the exception of Councilmember Bloxham. But I guess what I'm saying is if the decisions that we make tonight don't go necessarily fully in the way that you all have presented them, it's on us. It's not on you. And this is not something that is reflecting negatively on you all or the staff or the departments that put in so much work to help make sure the city is safe. But this would be a decision that we had made, and I don't personally want any of that to make you feel as though we don't value your work or your opinions on the things that we ask you to do.
Okay.
May I ask, what facts do we think will change in 2 weeks or a month? Facts are stubborn things. They usually don't change if they're facts. And what the staff has done is base this analysis, which you pay us to do, on facts. Facts based on many, many years of experience in general. You have best city engineer, best city attorney in the state. And they have done their job, and they've done their job extremely well, and they've done it, from my perspective, absolutely correctly. So I guess I'm not confused, but I'm concerned that we're taking something perhaps that is very objective. There is a standard, and it either meets the standard or it doesn't, and we're perhaps trying to find a way to make a political solution to a objective engineering issue, which you can certainly do. That the council has the ability to do that, and of course we'll follow that. But the facts will not change at all. They are what they are. And I would just say, with regard to the trees, the things that are 4-inch separation started out as half-inch separations. That's the nature of it. And we've had, I'm not an expert in engineering, but I listen to them. I've been here 34 years. And when the city engineer sits up here and says to everybody that grinding doesn't work, and unless the trees are removed, you're spending taxpayer dollars again to do the very same thing that we spent before, that is a fact. It's not a conjecture. It's not a theory. It's not a possibility. It is a fact. And I know you take all that seriously, as do the staff, and that's what's driven our recommendation. Is we have wonderful individuals in a single subdivision. I know many of them personally. They're wonderful people, none better than that. We also have 90,000 other residents in the city who are paying the cost associated with this. The staff believes, and we think you do as well, that we have an obligation to ensure and look every citizen in the eye and be able to say, we have used your money wisely, not to provide a Band-Aid approach that has to come back in 3 years and redone again because of a tree. Our solution, what we recommend you pay us to do, and we try to do it well, is to say there is a problem. While we're in there, let's take care of the problem. And that's what's driven the staff's perspective on that. But I think that's important to understand, is that there are few wonderful people that are here tonight. We've had multiple public meetings, multiple discussions on it. There are 100 families or more who were impacted by this decision. Each time we've had a meeting, those numbers have declined and dwindled. Out of 100 employees, and I'm not dismissing them, we have 3 wonderful families represented here this evening, and I know maybe there's a few others in that, I think that should speak to some degree to the efforts that have been made by the staff and the reasonability over time that has come to this situation. So again, I tried to sit quiet, but I think we just need to think through that. And I'd come back to what I asked before: are the facts going to change? If they're not, then perhaps we just ought to make a decision and move forward one way or the other. Because to delay, we all know that from our own experience, it doesn't change anything. It just postpones the difficult decision. Thanks for your time.
Okay. I think that I think all of you have had a chance to kind of really express your concerns, your angst over this decision as well. You've also presented a pretty favorable solution. So, Council, I bring this back to you then to take action regarding item. Let's think, where am I at here? Item C, which is the bid award for Page Professional Service, or Resolution 2518.
Mayor, I don't know if I'm ready to make a motion, but just, Alex, I want you to understand that any deliberation here, I don't want to diminish the work of the staff. We're a team here where we are elected here to represent the people who live in the city. And we rely heavily on the knowledge, the institutional knowledge, and years of experience of staff in all departments of our city. So I don't want that to be diminished in any way by a tough decision that we're making at this time. One fact that I'm not sure on is, does a 1/4 inch lift on a sidewalk over 25 years require a tree removal? I don't believe it does. And I expressed that concern 2 weeks ago, that I'd love to visit the property with staff that makes those decisions. Unfortunately, I've said it, I'm 100% supportive of replacing the sidewalk and removing the trees on many places, many trees, many pieces of sidewalk. But it's tough for me to blanket approve this when I don't know what trees I am approving.
Yeah, and I agree with that. It's okay, Mayor. Have a doubt. I guess maybe the difference in perspective, respectfully, is that staff's not focused on the tree. We're focused on the safety risk. This is a safety issue. This whole thing is driven by safety. It's not a desire to get rid of trees or to keep trees or anything else. Trees just happen to be the secondary victim, right? They're collateral damage or what have you. So I guess, and this has been explained before, I would ask you to ask the city attorney, is a 1/2 inch lift a liability to the city in the same way that a 4-inch lift?
A 1/4 inch lift is a liability. I didn't say that wasn't.
No.
That warrants a sidewalk repair.
Right. And that's the challenge. I'm just acknowledging that we're coming from it from maybe a little bit different perspective. Our view is that if it's a liability risk, then it ought to be addressed. And if the way to address it, the only way to address it is through the removal of a tree, then that's part of that. So
I guess that's where we differ in opinion. Is I would gladly replace a couple sidewalk panels every 25 years if that's what I'm required to do, to keep my tree.
Yeah, that makes the assumption that the trees won't move in 25 years, and trees move based on watering habits and a lot of other things. But I'm not an arborist. I don't want to get into a debate about it. But I think the idea that, again, respectfully, the idea that the public, the sidewalk belongs to the public. It doesn't belong to the individual homeowner. So a reference that it's my sidewalk is not accurate. It belongs to all of the people in the city to have and the city has the responsibility to maintain it in a way that is safe for visitors, friends. It's not owned and controlled by the people there. As Clint was talking about earlier, and I'll be quiet, is the idea that individual citizens can dictate the level of maintenance and the method of maintenance of public infrastructure tips the whole world on its head with regard to that. What if I say I want to decide when and how and who I hire to maintain my sidewalk? Does that go to the street and how they maintain the street in front of them? Does it go to utility lines? At what point does the city say there's a clear demarcation, or the government say there's a clear demarcation? The tree is yours, yes, but the infrastructure is our responsibility, not just on behalf of you, but on behalf of every citizen of the city. And that's part of the dilemma. We've had people in these public meetings, as you well know, that have said, "I just moved here." This is just one illustration of the challenges there. We've just moved here. Now I'm inherited. You're coming and telling me I have to fix this sidewalk because the previous owner didn't take care of it. So if we don't address the issue, in my opinion, then we put ourselves at risk. So how do we respond when some of these good folks move, which we all do, we'll move eventually, and then we're coming to the next homeowner and saying, and they're saying, why wasn't this solved before? We say, well, the homeowner said they were going to do it. Well, they didn't do it now, but you got to do it now. So it's I understand, it's a difficult issue. It really is to work through. So thanks for your time.
Okay. Is anybody willing to take any action on this, or feel like you need to table it?
Madam Mayor, I move that we authorize the bid award for Page's Professional Tree Services, Case Creek Estate Sidewalk Repair Project 24-55, and Resolution 2518.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved in second. I'm half tempted to do a roll call vote on this, even though I get the fact that it's a consent item, but I think that some of you guys may want to express your reasoning for your vote. So with that, Councilmember Thomas?
Can I ask a question? Point of clarification?
Yeah, don't answer yet.
To the city attorney.
Go ahead.
So our discussion about the funding being us taking the funding, that doesn't necessarily have to be a part of the motion, or should it be part of the motion?
It doesn't have to be.
Okay. So this is just the bid award
Correct.
itself, not any of the specifics that we may have to decide later.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, that could change things. Councilmember Thomas?
Aye, but I just want to say something. So,
That's why I'm doing this.
yeah. To me, this is a twofold what we're doing. One, we're looking at a tree as to what should happen, and the other one, we're looking at what it takes to fix it. Okay? And a third one, which I'm just going to say this, the city stepped up to pay 50%, right? And maybe even 100%, okay? Because it's they called it an emergency. 10 years ago, maybe 10 anyway, same thing happened to a lady down the street. She had a big willow somebody planted, and it was huge, and the sidewalk was toast. And when the city came in, she had to pay to have it removed. And I don't think she had to pay for the sidewalk. I'm not sure about that. But she was broke. She didn't have the money to fix it. But she had to. We couldn't hire somebody, so a bunch of idiots went down there and tried to cut the tree down. And we did an okay job, but, But my thought process is we're talking about making this a once only deal. And I don't agree with it, because she was no different than all the people in the subdivision. I mean, they're not all paying for all the trees. They're paying for the trees, maybe one, maybe two. And it's like, and then when we shut it off and say, okay, we're not doing that anymore, that doesn't sit right with me. If we're going to do it, we do it all the time. If we don't, and I understand that's not the most popular thing to say here right now, but going through that with that lady, I just thought, you know, how sad. And nobody stepped up city-wise to help her out. A lot of the people in the area there stepped up and helped her out. And but that's, you know, I say aye to what needs to be done. And I don't understand the tree part enough, but I understand what needs to be done. And I say, if we don't get it done, then we're just going to prolong nothing, you know, however we do it. So excuse me for saying that, but I say aye. I agree.
Okay. Councilmember Smith Edmondson.
So I'm going to say aye to using pages to authorize this sidewalk repair project. I do understand that the 0.25 inch lift is based on ADA requirements, and that is an ADA trip hazard. So while I feel, you know how I feel personally about it being that, you know, that small of a lift, I do understand that it is a hazard, and we wouldn't want anyone, resident or otherwise, to have a mishap on behalf of the sidewalk not being to code where it needs to be. I am also still very open to what Councilman Roberts mentioned and going out with staff as they go to mark them, perhaps, just so that visually we can understand what that looks like. And also open to some financial options after this vote.
Okay. Councilman Morris?
Aye. It remains, to me, a health, safety, and welfare issue. I don't want anybody hurt. I'm grateful for the staff going out and doing their due diligence in a professional manner, which they have done it, reaching out to the residents, and each of you for reaching out to the residents and listening to concerns. So again, it's a safety issue for me, and I vote aye.
Okay. Councilman Bloxham.
Yeah, I vote aye in a limited manner. Mostly just I want to authorize the project to move forward, but I think that we should provide financial assistance. I think it's what we should do for the residents who live in this area. And I also think that I don't think this is the end of the discussion in terms of which trees get removed. I don't think that has to be the final stay here with our discussion about the authorizing of the bid award. I think it's just a matter of starting the process and getting things moving. And I've appreciated all the discussion and dialogue we've had from the residents. As you can see, we take these issues seriously, and I hope that as time moves on that we can find a way for maybe all the concerns won't be able to be dealt with, but that we can find a way to, both on the financial aspect and potentially on the walk of the neighborhood or whatever we decide in terms of the engineering department, that we find a way to make it as easy of a fix as we can.
Okay, Councilman Roberts.
Councilmember Thomas told a story, so I want to tell one.
Sure.
About, I don't know when Laton Parkway was built, but 17 years ago or so. I hooked my tractor up to a tree. It was a black walnut. Get emotional about a tree. My grandfather brought a walnut home from the Southern States Mission. My great-grandfather, and he planted a tree in my front yard, what's my home now. And 100 years later, I had to take that down for a sidewalk to be built for Laton Parkway. It was tough then. It's still tough. I agree with pretty much everything you said, Alex, and I appreciate your wisdom. I'm still hung up on the fact that I feel like this is a blanket approval to take whatever tree. And without knowing that a 25-year-old tree caused a 1/4 inch lift in a sidewalk, which warrants a sidewalk replacement or repair, I don't feel it requires a tree removal. So for that reason, I vote no at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Council, I appreciate your input here and understand the difficult decision you had to make tonight. However, I did hear that there's additional discussion warranted only on the financial side of it, I believe, and also which trees would come out. So with that, I would say that this item does pass, and that hopefully everyone here tonight can see that we definitely take everything seriously, and even when you get beat up on some of the decisions, you still have to make the decision on what's the best interest for, and I hate to use this word, for the greater good. So with that, we'll go ahead and move on, and I do want to apologize to everybody that has sat through this. I know that some of you have been here since 5 o'clock, 5:30, and I appreciate that, but we will move on to item number D, which is another important topic that's going to require some additional discussion here tonight. But first off, we need to have it presented by Mr. Jackson, okay, I guess our attorney, Clint Drake, will be presenting the items regarding the Holmes Creek Reservoir pipeline.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be brief because I know that, number one, we discussed this at length during the work session meeting. The property owner representatives were there, so they've heard the discussion. For the public's benefit, this is a resolution 25-19 authorizing the city to use eminent domain powers for the purpose of a secondary water line that would connect Holmes Creek Reservoir and Andy Adams Reservoir. It's a vital project that's important to the future of our water use in the city and our ability to effectively and efficiently deliver water. Based on that, I will just simply state that the resolution authorizes the city to use eminent domain if necessary to acquire, in this case, an easement, and that can file a suit if necessary. I want to make two very brief clarifications of my presentation earlier today. I had talked about evaluation they had made a counteroffer of $27,300. And I mentioned that was $300 per home. I misstated when I said that would be some sort of a rebate or it would be given to them. It would just be put into their HOA account. So I just want to make sure we're clear on that. And then just part of that negotiation is at one point there was a discussion about them asking the city to take over a private road. Facts are still the same. That was just part of a negotiation where they said, well, maybe you could take over this private road, but again, doesn't meet the standards of the city road standards and would require a significant expense to do so. So with that, I would also let you know, as you are aware, that this one actually does require by law that the property owner have an opportunity to voice any concerns or say whatever they'd like to say, and I believe their HOA presidency is here to make that comment.
Okay. We'll be happy to entertain that. Council, do you feel like you need to have any discussion or have any questions or concerns at this point, or would you, if not?
I just had one question for Clint.
Absolutely.
Was the HOA folks, were they represented by council during this, or was it just communications?
I don't believe so. I think they made mention that maybe there's some lawyers in the neighborhood and they might have had some informal discussions, okay. But
nothing.
They'd never told us that they were represented by council, no.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any other questions? before we hear from the HOA and the residents? Okay. So, yes, so at this time, you're welcome to come up to the podium. And once again, we just ask you state your name, and then you can go ahead and state your cause here as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. My name is John Fulmer, the HOA president. I'll give the left side of your neck a little bit of a rest. You can start turning to the right side for a minute. Yeah, we've had some discussion with Laton City, and we've been in 3 meetings. Mr. Drake did attend the last meeting. We've talked about various things, and maybe you have been informed about some of these things as well. You saw the emails in your work meeting. It was a sketch or a sampling of what took place. And I just wanted to start, just mention a few things first. And in the December 20th email, that's the email that said that the appraisal came back at a $2,900 figure. And in an email, they said that whatever that figure was, they would take that as their offer to purchase the land. And then almost 2 months later, a little over 2 months, I received a letter from Laton City. And in that February 28th letter, it basically said, we sent this letter to you as an attempt to negotiate without going to eminent domain. In our last meeting where Mr. Drake did attend, he did say at first that there was no negotiating with the $2,900 figure. Yet in that December 20th email, it said the same thing. And then I receive a letter 2 months later that says, we are trying to attempt to negotiate with you still. So we took that to mean that that was meaningful for us to get together. We have a baseline. We had an original offer. Our HOA association didn't know how to interpret that first offer. They didn't know what to compare it to. So the appraisal was done. And I had to go back with whatever the offer is and get 60% approval from the homeowners. We have 91 homeowners, and I have to get 60%. We have to go to every homeowner to see if the negotiated amount is agreeable. And in my mind, negotiation is where 2 parties agree on a figure, not where it's just the appraisal value. Okay? I don't know if any of you have sold a home, but usually appraisal values, if there is value to that land, doesn't always just sell for the comps. There is a value that's established because of other things. Now that appraisal, done by a professional appraiser, and going back through it, there were some things that probably were left out. And so I'm going to turn the time over to a few more board members for their time, and some of the members that want to make a voice as well. And you'll see through what they say, there are some other things that the appraisal did not take into consideration that are genuinely a concern. So I'll just turn that time over to them now.
Okay, hello. My name is Brian Hill. I'm a homeowner in the Peacefield neighborhood, and I'm also a current board member of the HOA, and I'd like to thank you all for the opportunity to speak. I wanted to address some things about the assessment that probably weren't taken into account by whoever did the appraisal, weren't taken into account for the appraisal. There's a 30-foot spruce tree that is going to be taken out of there. I do not believe the city is going to replace a 30-foot blue spruce tree as part of this to make it look like it never went away. That would be more than what our appraisal came in at. So I don't think that was taken into account. I also don't think it was taken into account that the easement, we lose any ability to do anything in the future in that land area. And it's been expressed that that land we can't build on. That is correct. We cannot build structures on that land, but we can build a kid's playground. We could build a pickleball court. We could make a picnic area with tables. If this easement goes through, that is valuable to our community, which then is then taken away from us in the future. Okay? And right now, we have an aged community. But in 10 years from now, we could start having families move in where they want a playground. They want a picnic area. They want to do something with that area. That will be taken away from us. So when the appraiser came in and said there's no value to the land, that's incorrect. Okay. We already talked about the $300 going into the, another issue I want to talk about is with this easement, there's one valve that turns on the water to the entire preservation area. So that valve is over by where our swimming pool is, which is also in that common area, but that was given special consideration so we could have that in the community. That valve turns on that whole area. There is a secondary valve that shuts off the lower portion of that area, but where the easement goes through, that is only one valve in the street, and the only people that can turn off that valve or turn on that valve is the city. So when we have a problem with irrigation up in that area where the easement is going to be going through, we lose water to that whole preservation area. So during the entire time that that pipe would be cut through there, we will have no water to any of our grass, any of our trees, any of our bushes whatsoever. So we risk, depending on how long it takes to put that through, we risk, once the water can't be turned on when it should be, we risk losing a portion of that sod, grass, trees, everything. And I appreciate the fact that they want to move through with the water. We use a lot of water in our community for that big open space. But there's got to be some consideration where we no longer can use that land, and I don't think that was taken into consideration when the appraisal was done. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I promise this is not the Brian show, but my name is also Brian, but Brian Van Utert. I'm a resident of this subdivision for the last 21 years. Mike and Sandy Hendry are also in this subdivision. They wish they could be here tonight. They are out of town. Mike provided a letter that I would like to read on his behalf. It says to us. You might tell who brought the Hendry. Oh yeah, Mike Hendry owned Mountain View Title, and Sandy Hendry owns Minky. A couple of valuable people in our city. Mm-hmm. To esteemed members, I'm writing this letter in anticipation of it being read on Thursday, March 20th, 2025 at a public meeting of the Laton City Council. The purpose of this letter is to provide my comments, which I believe are consistent with the thoughts of others pertinent to the granting of and consideration to be paid for an easement to be granted to Laton City, a municipal corporation which benefits the city and burdens the real property owned by Peacefield Homeowners Association. The easement, as I understand it, is for a secondary water line which will connect two reservoirs owned by or operated by Laton City, a municipal corporation, which crosses on, over, and across real property owned by Laton City, on, over, and across the real property owned by the Peacefield Homeowners Association, and along public streets and other property owners. Before providing my comments, I take the time to provide information to the council which may have relevancy. My wife, Sandy Hendry, and I moved to the Peacefield subdivision a number of years ago. Our first dwelling located in Peacefield subdivision was identified as 527 North Peregrine Cove. The property on Peregrine Cove was sold by Sandy and I with the proceeds of the sale of that home. We purchased the home located at 1740 Ridge Road. Our home located at 1740 Ridge Road abuts the common area park owned by the HOA. The proposed easement is within 50 or so feet of our west property line. Following the acquisition of the home at 1740 Ridge, I submitted to the attorney's office of Laton City an offer to purchase real property owned by Laton City, a municipal corporation which is south of our home and which abuts the portion of the common area owned by the Peacefield HOA. The offer was made with the understanding that when acquired, or prior to the acquisition thereof, that I would meet with Peacefield HOA in an attempt to realign boundaries of our home with the HOA property, and in consideration of doing so, donating to Peacefield Homeowners Association additional property for the use of the common area. It was also disclosed that Sandy and I would landscape the area conveyed to the Homeowners Association and provide the vast majority of funds to have a pickleball court installed on the property conveyed to the Peacefield HOA for the use of the homeowners and their guests. On the real property not conveyed to the Peacefield HOA, that was to be purchased from Laton City, and that's where the pipeline is going through. I intended to construct a single-family dwelling thereon, or if possible, a twin home to be constructed thereon for use as an investment property for Sandy and I. Sandy and I each own or have owned businesses located in Laton City, which have had the great support of Laton City and our neighbors. The land transaction that I proposed was to be both a thank you to the community and as an investment for Sandy and I. As part of that negotiation and as part of the HOA business came to my attention that Laton City intended to construct a secondary water line using a portion of the common area park under the terms, conditions of an easement agreement, which detailed the area to be burdened by the installation, maintenance, repair, modification, or replacement of the secondary water line and equipment located within the easement estate. At the annual meeting of the Peacefield HOA, it was revealed that an offer had been made by Laton City, a municipal corporation, to purchase from the Peacefield HOA the easement referenced to herein. With some reservation, the amount that Laton City proposed to be paid was disclosed. A brief discussion was had relating to that disclosure. The meeting concluded, and I came away therefrom with the understanding that further discussions would be had as to the granting of the easement and the consideration to be paid. I soon realized that as I looked from my home to the south and saw the stockpiling of pipe on the real property owned by Laton City, that the easement was progressing much faster than I had thought, and that any offer made to me to purchase the property had been rejected. Realizing that Laton City will be able to acquire the easement either by agreement or condemnation, I wanted to provide an opinion as to the acquisition, granting, and consideration paid for the easement estate to be granted. Having been in the title industry for almost 50 years, I felt that my comments have certain merits, and from the position of being next door to the construction of the easement and having to endure the negatives of living by the construction of the lines and equipment in and to the easement estate and taking into account other matters, may I provide the following comments. The consideration being paid for an easement of any kind takes into account multiple factors, including but not limited to the current use of the subject property, the zoning of the subject property, the benefits or burdens of the easement, and the aesthetics of the easement post-installation and maintenance thereof. B. The consideration paid is also predicated on the fact that the easement, in part, is located on, over, across, and beneath real property, which has been dedicated as common area within a designated subdivision, and which common area is burdened and benefited by a preservation easement. C, with the property being designated as common area and being a part of a preservation easement, the consideration being paid would be less than an easement which affects multiple improvements located on or near the easement. However, there are considerations which should be evaluated, such as the disruption of the use of the portion of the common area, i.e. the walking paths, the volleyball court, the common area itself, which are used by many citizens of Laton City, which are not members of the Homeowners Association. D, other matters must be considered in the negotiations as to consideration paid, such as goodwill, enhancement of the public experience, and time and energy costs. E, in my opinion, the original offer of $15,000 should have included, and it may have been, that the consideration paid be used for the improvements of common area within the Peacefield subdivision, its reserve account, and not as a distribution to homeowners on a prorated basis. If I would have any input in the matter, I would suggest that in addition to the cash consideration, that Laton City, through its purchasing ability and power, pay for 3 large trees to replace those trees which have died and are located on the west property line of the common area park. I previously stated that I, with the help of others, if so offered, would pay the cost to have the old trees cut down, the new ones planted in their place. This proposal, in my opinion, would have accepted to the Homeowners Association without opposition. I realize that I am late in giving this input and realizing that the payment of the amount demanded would set precedents. It is still my belief that the compromise amount and conditions thereto as proposed by me would be a much better solution than litigating the matter further. Time is money, and the sooner that the construction and completion of the installation of materials and equipment within the easement estate will be a benefit to all parties concerned. I appreciate living in Laton City. I try to maintain my home in a manner which is pleasing not only to myself but others. I would strongly suggest to the elected members of the HOA to take the funds provided and to make improvements to the common area, which would increase the enjoyment of the homeowners, the guests, the citizens of Laton. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Sincerely, Michael L. Hendry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
My name is not Brian, so I will offer a different non-Brian opinion. I actually don't have too much to add. What I probably want to focus on, a lot of this was hit, but is just the issues that we had with the appraisal that came through. From what we understood and what is in the appraisal, it says perpetual easements typically limit the development of the non-permanent structures in the after condition. Then it says the customary practice over this time period in Utah is for the agency to pay a percentage of the before condition of the unencumbered value. Typically, the percentage of the fee has ranged from 25% to 100%. The appraisal came back offering us 5%. The other things that we found were problematic, I guess we were supposed to legally be contacted by the appraiser to accompany them, which we were not. We didn't know he came, didn't know he was there. Didn't know when he left. I don't think anybody even saw him. So that part of the process did not happen. I think his appraisal would have changed had we been able to accompany him and point out the trees and the other things that were concerning to us, or the values that were probably missed. There was a couple other things here. I don't want to repeat what somebody else said. That probably is about all that I have. I do want to say again, as part of this process as volunteer board members, it's our job to represent the board or represent the members, and it's not our job to make the decision. So any offers that came, and this was known during the process, we had to take back and take to a vote to our members. So we couldn't accept anything anyway without the vote of 60% of our members, and the offers that we were given were not going to be approved or were not approved by our members. That's all I have.
Excuse me, before you leave, do you mind restating your name? I didn't.
I'm sorry. It. Sean O'Neill.
Sean? Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Larry Cook. Thank you so much for staying late and listening to us. I'm a member of the Homeowners Association and a member of the board. The only thing that I wanted to bring up is Sean Paul mentioned we were offered 5% of what the estimated value of the land. During the Case Creek discussion, there was a question as why did you negotiate lower than the appraised value? The number that was agreed upon was 85% of the appraised value. We're getting 5%. That's all I wanted to bring up. Thanks.
Okay.
My name's Kenneth Clifford, Ridge Road. I'm a member of the HOA as well. I was unaware of the information that was read about the Hendrys, thinking about building a couple of condominiums, high-end condominiums, below their point on what was, and I don't know whether they actually made a presentation to the council to do that, but I've been a realtor, sold over 250 homes since 1994, and I would say, and I'm up to speed on what properties in Peacefield are selling for today, and they're typically $750,000 on up to $1.5 million or more. So it's a great area, and if high-end condominiums were built there, and two of them, and Mr. Hendry had been able to rent those out, the property values there would have been $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 for the land. And to come back being offered $2,900 to the homeowner association because an appraiser said the value of the land was nothing, that's terrible. I've listened to you for almost 2 hours talking about being good to trees, and I agree with being good to trees. And Mr. Roberts, I appreciate you standing up for the trees. The world needs trees. I'm an engineer and scientist by background, and I love trees, and I think there should have been a way of doing it with the sidewalk and not disturbing the trees, other than maybe the roots that will be the problem over the next 25 years. I appreciate Mr. Jensen and what he did a couple of years ago. We had a terrible road on Ridge Road with lots of indentations, and it was tough to get around. And we met him, and he said, I'll get that job done. And within a couple of weeks, he got that Peacefield area road resurfaced, and they did a great job. I've seen the painting where all of the infrastructure below the ground is going to go on our roads. So in addition to being against what they're offering cost-wise, I would like to suggest that you do a great job as there's got to be 2/10 of a mile or 3/10 of a mile of road that's going to be torn up. And often the way it's torn up, you have to drive along and you say, is this really the way Laton wants our roads to be? And I just would propose that you take a great job in making sure that it's properly compacted and we don't have a bunch of shallow spaces. So I appreciate you listening to my thoughts off the top of my head. I appreciate all of you for your efforts in representing the city's 90,000. You're doing a great job. And I appreciate you considering some financial help for those people that are going to be losing all their trees. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Kenneth.
My name is Scotty Kearns. It's past my bedtime. I usually go to bed at like 8:30. Madam Mayor, I wanted to tell you thank you. Probably don't remember a call that I had with you. It was when we were having Code Blue. You actually called me back after I called you, left a message, and you called me back. So thank you for your public service in doing that. I'm kind of a numbers guy. And I look at the value of land, and I would love to buy that property for $2,900. That'd be a great deal. What I'd really like to do with it, is it 6 acres? 6 acres. If you go right down in Kaysville, there's a nice little garden. Has anybody seen that off the side of the road?
Mm-hmm. Community garden.
Community garden. Do you think that somebody would pay $2,900 to put a garden next to our place? I'd love that. Absolutely love it. I think the way that this happened was unfair. I think that the way that the process went down was unfair. I think the value is unfair. I completely agree with the process of putting in a pipeline, though. I think it's great. We have to take care of our water. We threw out the number of 5%. What was, Sean, if we did that on a value per, what'd that work out to be? $31 per square foot.
Per house.
Per house. Oh, per house. I'm sorry.
40 cents a square.
Okay. Would you guys like to have your land mowed through at $2,900? Mayor, no? I like that. How about you? I can't see. I don't have my glasses on. Robert, $2,900, 6 acres. What do you think?
It's not 6 acres.
How much is
Appraisal
it?
said.
So the appraisal said.
It's the pipe, the area of the pipe running through. That's not 6 acres. Our engineer could tell us how much it is.
How many acres is it?
So it's,
I think it was 0.17.
I'm sorry, I make mistakes. But still, how would you like it to have that ran through? Now, the attorney, we had a meeting with the board that came in, and you basically said you're done negotiating. Is that right?
No.
Is that what you guys said? Did you say the attorney said they're done with negotiations? Sally, is that what you said? Not negotiate over $2,900. Is that still the case, or do we still have the opportunity to negotiate?
The letter said we did.
The letter said we did. What we heard from the attorney is that he could throw down eminent domain in 10 days. Is that what you said?
oh, I was asked the question, and I described the process.
Okay. Which was?
To get a temporary right of access would take approximately 14 days.
Right. That was kind of a threat to us, actually.
No, it was a question that was asked.
Okay. What I'm asking for is, I hear you guys sit here at the stand and say, we want to take care of our residents. We want to make sure that people are taken care of. All we're asking for as residents is to be paid fairly for our property. And the next thing is that when it's done, which you will be going through that, is that it's taken back to the way that we found it. And that we're talking about 1/4 of an inch on sidewalks. I want my grass the same level. I don't want to be like this. And I'll drop a bomb here. Nobody's gonna like it. I went out with my camera. There's a piece of sidewalk right out in front. It's 1/4 inch. You might want to get that fixed. Dr. Seuss, save the trees.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Is there anyone else? If not, I would like. Okay.
I'm timing you.
Go right ahead, Dave. Randy Bird. I'm on the vice president of the board as well. Just wanted to say when we met with Clint, we thought we were going in for a negotiation, and he said $2,900 was the appraisal. That's what we're bound by. We can't negotiate. That's basically what we were told. We thought we could negotiate. I think we could have avoided this whole thing had we been able to do that. 1 minute. And then he said, if we do a second appraisal, I'll add that on, which told me that was not a fixed figure, the $2,900. So I'm just saying, had we been able to negotiate, it would have been a better deal. 1 minute, Dave.
Oh, thanks, Randy.
Okay, I know that under consent items, as we hear people, we don't necessarily engage in any type of conversation. However, I think this does beg the question, is the original offer of $15,000 a viable option still? I think that's what they were asking.
So that's a question for you. You're the council.
Okay.
I'm simply operating under the direction that I've been given and consistent with every other acquisition we've done. So that's completely up to you. That's your decision as a city council. I'm happy to respond to some of that if you'd like me to, or.
Yeah. Sure. I mean,
I think first and foremost, yes, there was a discussion that we are bound by the appraisal. That was made clear. It was made clear to them verbally. It was made clear in writing. It was gone over in that. We don't need to talk about that. That's because we're not appraisers. We're not professional appraisers. We don't do that. We can do our best, but once we do that, then that's what we've been instructed to do, is to follow that. But to say that the negotiation was over is just simply not true. I encouraged them. I told them that if they wanted to affect change with regard to the appraisal, that they should contact the appraiser, because we didn't do the evaluation, the appraiser did. Along those same lines, it was said that by law the appraiser is required to reach out to them. He did. So I'll read to you from his notes. This is the appraiser. I spoke with John Fulmer, Peacefield HOA president, on February 7th, 2025. He noted that the city had already contacted them, the HOA had already received a copy of the projected maps and understood the need for the easement through the open space of the development. I noted that we had been to the property once already to understand the scope of our assignment. I offered to inspect the property with him and one or two additional board members if requested. He noted that he was heading out of town, but had an HOA meeting that night and would discuss our conversation with the board and get back to him if needed. I also told him to have the other board members reach out to me via text if they had any unanswered questions after the HOA meeting. I have not heard from Mr. Fulmer or any board member since. So to say that didn't happen, we of course follow the law. It's important to us. Mr. Lang did reach out to them. So there's that. To say that I said there's no negotiation, that's just simply not true. I think what Mr. Bird was referring to is, again, I can only do what you authorize me to do. I'm authorized to negotiate regarding an easement and an appraisal. Now, a lot of things are negotiation that aren't value. There's negotiation of, well, what happens to this fence? Or can we have a fence here? Or what about the timing? Or where are you going to start? Can we start here? Can we start? There's a lot of things that fall under negotiation. But even in that very meeting, I told them that I was authorized to offer double the appraisal in this case, because what he's referring to is I also offered that we would do a second appraisal at our cost, although we were accused, or the appraiser was accused, of being a hired gun. And so I said, you may not want that, because you've already stated you don't trust the appraiser that we hired the first time, so why would you trust the second appraiser? Nonetheless, I said this is approximately what it would cost the city. So again, taking into consideration the cost that would be assessed to the taxpayers, and said, rather than paying the appraisal, which I'm authorized to, and Steve is authorized to do, we can just give you that value. So to say that we didn't negotiate is not true. They walked out with an offer twice the amount of the appraisal, almost twice the amount of the appraisal. So, unfortunately, you're not getting the full information. And then lastly, and then I'll turn it to you for any discussion or any questions you have. Again, what we're really talking about here is two things. Any use of eminent domain involves two things. And I didn't hear anything to the first point. And the first point is that, does the city have the right to do it? I haven't heard anybody contest that the city does not have the right to put a secondary water pipe across some land in the city. The second one is value. Again, as part of negotiation, I informed them that if they wanted to, if they didn't have any issue with the first issue of does the city have the authority to do it, that they could sign a right of entry agreement that would allow us to enter the property, not hold up the project, construct the project, and they still retain all rights to valuation and can have all of that discussion. But unfortunately, I was told that wasn't going to be an option. Maybe it is now. But again, I didn't hear any issues tonight about the authority to do it, only the assessment, which we can continue to have those discussions. But that was the context of the 14 days where they said, well, what if we don't give you the right? It was honestly more of a threat the other way, where it was, well, then you're going to have to sue us, and it's going to cost you more to sue us than it is for you to pay for the property. And I discussed with them the need to be responsible with taxpayer dollars, and why we don't just pay settlement value, because that would be extremely costly to the city, not just with eminent domain matters, but with claims, and discuss the public policy behind that. But unfortunately, they weren't interested in that solution. And so that was the context for well, we'll have, then they asked what we would do. And I said, well, we'd have to pursue it by court order. And that would take about 14 days. This is the process for it. And that's how it happens. Again, I don't want you to get the impression that it was a confrontational meeting. It wasn't. I thought we left the meeting friends. It's been a little bit more agitated here tonight, but I thought it was a very good meeting, and I thought it was clear if they had issues with the value that they should contact the appraiser, but apparently that has not happened. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, council, do you have any additional questions or concerns here, or need clarification? Okay.
Thanks, Mayor. I have a couple of questions. Some kind of came out in the discussion, and for the public who doesn't know what we were talking about, the original offer for the easement was $15,000, and then that was rejected. And so I was going to ask, well, did you offer to get an additional appraisal? And it sounds like the city offered to get an additional appraisal and pay for that. Generally, when you get an appraisal that you don't agree with, I've experienced this more than once, then you can get another one. I often don't like to do that because then I'm paying again. But if the city is offering to pay for that, I'm a little confused as to why you would not have accepted that, to see if there was an additional, there was more to be offered on a second appraisal. I also have a question, and this may be for Steve, about the pathway of the pipe, because the residents are concerned about those trees, which I think is of concern, because that open space is probably the full 6 acres, is what you're talking about, is the whole open space. And I know that there are certain pathways that are easier to connect to, but is there any leeway in some of that to where maybe those trees are not in the pathway of the pipe or don't have to be in the pathway?
It's my understanding that there is only one tree. It's the one that was referenced, the spruce tree, that would be possibly impacted by that alignment. And really, it's only proximity if we have to dig next to that tree and the roots have spread into the easement area. So as far as other trees out there, that's the only one that we have. But we do have an existing storm drain pipe through this open space as well. So we're kind of paralleling that through part of the area as well.
So you're saying that when you get in there, you'll see if you may have to affect that tree, but you might not have to, just depending on how wide the space needs to be dug to get the pipe in.
Yeah, exactly. And if we do have to affect it, then we would have to replace that tree.
And then there was talk about fences and whatnot. Would there be any additional obstructions to this space once the pipe is in and you lay everything back as it was?
There's no proposal to have anything there. As a matter of fact, when we discussed some of the options, we even talked about possibly paving the trail there, and we were informed by the preservation easement people that we couldn't even put pavement on their trail. So our intention is just to put it back exactly as it is with the grass and whatever we've impacted, just to restore that, just like we do with all of our other projects.
Thanks. And then I think I have one last question, then I'll be done. And Joellen's back there. She may can help with this. Is there anything that would prevent the HOA from using any other portion of this 6 acres to do a playground or pickleball or any of the other things that they're talking about maybe wanting to do, that this easement, that they think this easement would prevent them from doing? And I don't know who needs to answer that.
My understanding, I can take a shot at it. My understanding is that the preservation easement is what is controlling what can and can't be done on that property from the standpoint of surface improvements. The HOA open space requirement is restricting it from being able to be developed into other homes or something like that. But the conservation easement, my understanding is pretty restrictive as to what can and can't be done on that property.
Yeah, I would even say that originally, I don't remember if it was an internal discussion with staff or with the HOA, but it was discussed that perhaps we could, as this was back when they had discussed and not officially offered, but sort of offered to just donate the property to the city. So again, it may have been part of that discussion, or it might have just been internal where we thought, well, maybe we can give them something of value like paving the trail. But we were told that that's not an option.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, council?
I had a question for Steve.
Actually, let me allow the council to ask their questions.
Thank you. Steve, did you say there's a existing storm drain that parallels this easement? In this
For
area?
a part of this location, there's a storm drain that runs through this open space and down into the detention basin that's kind of further to the southwest.
So we already hold an easement there?
Yeah, that was established with the subdivision as the drainage went through this area.
What are the limitations on that easement? What can be done on the surface over the existing one that's already there?
Just the restrictions to permanent structures that we wouldn't be able to get to our pipe if we were to do that. So typically we restrict that to anything that would cause problems for us to maintain and access our pipe. Usually flat work would be allowed. It would be difficult if you had a pickleball court that had post-tension concrete in it, because then we wouldn't be able to access these pipes without cutting through cables and all that other stuff. But, if it was like a sidewalk or a patio or something like that, that we could saw cut the concrete away, that would be usually acceptable to us.
And as far as mitigating the watering, the concerns of irrigation to other parts of their open space, I'm pretty familiar with, I have an easement for a sewer line through one of my properties, and we'd be required to not disrupt that, correctly? I mean, is that correct?
We would require the contractor to ensure that the water could be used, and there may be a time where we would have to restrict it for, a reasonable time, but not enough that it could, kill all of the grass or anything like that. We would run temporary lines around the construction if we had to make sure they still had their water.
And is this on a timeline for the irrigation time or before the irrigation season, or not really tied to that?
It's not necessarily tied to the irrigation season. It's more tied to the funding source that we have and the requirement to get it finished up by the end of this year.
Thank you.
Yep.
So what's your anticipated amount of time to go through this section of this property?
I can't give you a definite on that. The project is basically a 3-month project, but they want to start or they have started running, electrical lines over there off of Gentile Street. But, I would anticipate maybe 3 or less weeks to get through this section. Just depends. I mean, it's open ground.
So about 2 to 3 weeks, or 3 weeks?
I would think 2 to 3 weeks at the most, and then we would need to do the restoration work and everything else.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah. I'm confused. Might be because it's late. So the concerns that were brought up about wanting to, you have this easement and you really can't, currently there's nothing going on top of it. Mm-hmm. But there could be. And it's been mentioned, well, we might do this, or we might do this, or we might do this. We just heard that. How do appraisers look at that? And was that part of the appraisal process? So where, I know Laton City has done appraisals, and we've gone back and said, hey, you forgot about this and this and this and this, and got another appraisal, whether it was favorable or not. Why not ask for is that not part of the appraisal process, or would that be part of a second appraisal process?
Well, it could be part, sure, and it could be part of the first appraisal process. Again, I encourage them, if they had issues with the appraisal, to contact the appraiser. Yeah. We don't have any input on the appraisal. We don't do anything with this.
So you go back to the appraiser and say, hey, well, what about this and this and
Correct.
this and this and this?
That's for the property owner to do. We don't do that.
Okay, that's why I'm confused.
We're trying not to influence.
We don't.
No, oh yeah, I understand.
Yeah, all we do is say we need this property appraised.
Yeah.
Use your knowledge and experience to do it, and let us know.
Now we're talking about eminent domain.
I'm confused, but I can say the appraiser is aware of the preservation easement and aware of the open space requirements as they ask the questions that come through. And I'm unaware if he called the easement holder for the preservation easement, but with our experience with Mr. Lang, he's very thorough when it comes to those types of things to make sure that he is fully aware of what restrictions or could or couldn't be on the property.
And the tree was part of that as well?
Well, I think that the tree definitely, if the homeowners have a concern about that, then we should have them talk to Mr. Lang and express their concerns, and he's offered to meet with them, and I believe that offer is still on the table. We would expect it to be on the table as well, and so.
And again, that the tree is not identified as some. If it were identified, for example, our sidewalk discussion, where it is coming out, it's a different issue. So I probably shouldn't conflate them. But it's if it's identified as something that must be removed, then that would be. But it's not identified as that right now. So if there was an impact, or if there could be an impact, then that's something that could be considered later. Again, not necessarily as part of the value of the land, but the value of the tree.
Yeah, any damage we do, as we've said before, our intention is to be fair, and these ladies and gentlemen I haven't been part of those meetings, but everything that's been reported by the staff has been very positive toward you, so thank you for that approach. You showed it again tonight, so thank you. But what I was going to say is I think the answer is to go back and have a discussion with Mr. Lang and share with him some of the things you've shared with us tonight. But the point I wanted to try to make was, again, I'm dangerous trying to be a city manager, let alone a lawyer, so he can kick me. But the purpose of this tonight is not to put leverage in any way or a threat to the residents. We're simply trying to convey the idea, and I think we told you that before, is that this is a serious issue, and there are timelines associated with millions of dollars of funding that says we need to drive this to a decision. And so this meeting tonight is a very significant part of that, to meet our statutory obligations to make sure that the residents have an opportunity to hear. We've had other situations where people have tried to challenge. We've done the same thing and tried to challenge it, and it's cost a lot of time and a lot of delays in projects. And so tonight is not about trying to use a heavy hand to force you to come to some agreement or vice versa, but it's to say this is part of the process that has to be done, and we don't want to miss it, both for our benefit, so we comply with the law, and for your benefit, so you have an opportunity to be heard. But it doesn't mean that there can't be ongoing discussions about the very issues you've talked about. And typically, as Clint explained on negotiations, that idea is typically under our, again, it may not make sense to everybody, but the city, forgive me, this is just my interpretation, but the city stands in the place that you are all, I assume, private business owners, or you have your own careers and so forth. And you have the ability on behalf of yourself to buy and sell and trade and do all those kind of things with another independent party. In this case, the city's responsibility, one of those, is to stand in the place of the public, right? It's not our individual ability. And so the state law and the council and policies set up a framework within which we are required to represent the interests of that public body, and we try to do it well. You've heard tonight that sometimes people agree and sometimes people disagree with how we try to do that, but we take that seriously. And so with government, there are usually, responsible government, there are usually constructs that are placed around that to make sure that doesn't get abused, and it becomes, well, I know Mr. Bird, we call you by another name almost around him, but because I know him and associate him, I'm not going to treat him differently than Mr. Fomer, right? And we try to take that very seriously. And so sometimes that comes across as being, non-workable or non-caring. It's none of those things. We're just trying to stay within a structure so we can look the public in the eye and say we've done it well. So typically on appraisals, that forms the basis of a starting point. And typically any negotiations that move us off that appraisal are based on these other considerations, right? Not things that normally you might give away as an individual. You say, I'm fine with that. I don't care about that. But we don't presume to do that on behalf of the public. So it's I hope that makes sense. It's a little bit different. And that's why we work off an appraisal, because we're not experts. We're not realtors. But we're trying to represent the public. And then as additional information comes forward that says, well, you didn't, what about this, and what about this, and what about that? That's the negotiation that allows those appraisals to move up and down, but at least in the history during I've been here, we've tried to be very careful about saying, well, I really like you, that's okay. I'm going to give away something that isn't mine. It's the public's. Does that make sense? So I'm not trying to change your mind. I'm just trying to give you an understanding of when we say we use appraisals as the basis and why we don't move off those very hard, because when we do, then we get into subjective waters and we try to be objective in the approach for the benefit of all the citizens. But it doesn't mean the negotiation has stopped. We just need to shed all the information, all the light on it. And then our desire is to be fair. We don't, the offer, no, be quiet. The offer of from zero, perhaps, that we thought was made to 15,000 was at our request, because that's what we paid other people in the area. And we don't want to be in a position where, even if people want to give us ground, we typically say, we pay other people for it, we need to pay you for it. Or if we pay Mr. Bird something more than we pay Mr. Fulmer, our history is to go back and say, hey, Mr. Fulmer, we paid you this, but now we paid Mr. Bird something more. We want to come back and pay you the same thing we paid him. Even when nobody asks us to, we do that because we think that's important, that consistency and fairness, regardless of the situation. So I think there's a way forward here, but this process is really important for us legally and statutorily, not as a heavy hand, but to make sure that we have dotted all of our I's and crossed all of our T's, and that this doesn't get tripped up and delayed over some technicality, because we've been there, done that before. And like I said, there's literally millions of dollars that have been given to us to connect these water sources, which are they're a blessing from heaven. I mean, nobody else has these reservoirs, and we want to take maximum use of them. By tying them all together, it'll be a tremendous benefit to the future usage of water and the consumption of water all across the city. We're spending tens of millions of dollars to make our infrastructure a place where we don't have to be reliant on other sources like most cities in the state are. We have our own resources. We're trying to develop those. So I've said too much again, but I wanted you to understand that context. And
if I could just add, just for tonight's purposes, this resolution does not mean that tomorrow we walk into the office, draft some eminent domain documents, and file a lawsuit. We fully intend and always do. It usually doesn't get this far, but we fully intend and always do continue to have discussions. And again, as part of negotiation of the last meeting, we even said we don't even have to have this meeting. If you can give us a right of access, we can continue. You can preserve all rights regarding value, and we can move forward. We don't have to have this meeting. All we have to do is sign a simple document that's used throughout the state. I've always just used UDOT's document that gets used all over the state, all the time, every week of every year, which would take it out of this process. So again, if anything was taken as a threat, it was not. It was meant to be an attempt to find common ground and not have this process. But we will continue. Unless they just don't want to talk to us, we will continue to have these conversations. Tonight is just about, it is a legal hurdle that must happen in order for us to proceed. And as Alex said, we've got some timelines that need to be met. And so this is an important part of that process.
Councilman Blockton?
Yeah, I would just echo that. I mean, even the resolution that we are proposing tonight, the first line says, now therefore, city staff is authorized to negotiate and purchase any and all real property interest of the necessary real property in approximate 1728 Ridge Road. So this is just a legal process that has to go through where we have to give you notice that this is going to be happening. So if there isn't any sort of misunderstanding that this is going to happen, and you guys are all like, oh, we totally understand it's going to happen, we just don't like the value, we can work with that. That's exactly what Clint's talking about. He's saying you can, if you guys are okay with that, sign the document, let us go on, and then all of a sudden you guys can talk about value later. We can talk about that. And I guess my last question would be, I mean, we're even going above and beyond to try to get you a second appraisal, because when I saw the appraisal now, we see a lot of appraisals, and that was really low. Now, I don't know. I'm not an appraiser. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying I was surprised by the valuation. Obviously, we were as a city too, because our first offer to you was 5 times that. So obviously we had sought that. So I would just say if there's a way for you to seek an appraisal, even a second opinion, and find a way to let us be able to access the land and get on our timelines. If it's only about value, then we can have that discussion as time goes on. So I just don't know if this has to be as drawn out as it needs to be. As long as it's just about value, it doesn't need to be that drawn out. Yeah.
Okay. One quick thing.
That will speak as me, Brian, not as Mike Hendry.
Okay.
First of all, I think this has been fantastic. I think you've been very open. You've heard us. We don't mind the pipeline. I don't think any of us do. When the Peacefield subdivision was approved by the Laton City Council, I think it was 1998 or 1999. I can't recall the exact date, but I read the city minutes. The city council said that this subdivision was going to be the premier subdivision in all of Laton. And our property taxes would confirm that. And so when I heard the value that was initially given to us, I personally was offended because of what we're assessed at. And then this, and I understand easements really well, and so I understand what they do. But this big easement, 15 grand, and what we're getting taxed on, are you kidding me? And then when the appraisal came back, I about fell over. So I don't think anybody wants to oppose a pipeline, period. It's just really to be compensated fairly with what we're being paid in our property taxes and what we were required to have as a subdivision in order to approve the subdivision at all. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I appreciate everyone once again hanging in there tonight. I will say that I will go on record that this is the absolute longest consent meeting we have ever had, and we still have another item to go. So, yeah, we still have a rezone. Council, I'll bring it back around for you to take action on item number D of our consent item.
Oh, I'm lost.
Yeah. Madam Mayor, I move that we approve Resolution 25-19 to authorize the acquisition of real property from Holmes Creek Reservoir to Andy Adams Reservoir by negotiation or condemnation.
Second.
And Mayor, I would suggest a roll call on this as well.
Okay. So it's been moved in second that we adopt Resolution 2519. So with that, I'm going to start out with Councilmember Morris.
Aye.
Councilmember Bloxham.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith Edmondson. Aye. Councilmember Thomas.
Aye.
And Councilmember Roberts.
I'm going to explain my vote again. I mean,
You're entitled to that.
No stories.
Because I was asked a question during the public. In my field of work, I'm very familiar with conservation easements as well. And if you're talking about purchasing ground versus an easement, and if you're talking about unencumbered land versus one land that has a conservation easement, it's not comparing apples to apples. So, but I hope I've been on both sides of this kind of vote with eminent domain, and I hope that it can be resolved without that. So I vote yes.
Okay, thank you. And I agree. I hope that both parties can come to an agreement that will be amicable so that we do not have to go to litigation. So, all right. Thank you very much. Okay, well, let's go on to our public hearing portion of our meeting. So those of you that have had to endure this 3-hour wait, 3-hour and 6-minute wait, I apologize again, but I do know that this is just as equally important to you. So we will give you the time and energy required. And with that, we'll go ahead and turn the time over to Weston Apolloni, who's going to present the item A, which is a rezone request.
This is where the concrete is supposed to go. This is the hindrance. This is where we're looking at the tree. Is that right here? Yeah. And this is a picture of that tree.
Don't wait a second, Ms. Mayor.
You know what?
No, this is.
Let's take a 1-minute stand here. I got to stand after sitting this long while we're waiting for these folks to kind of give them the information. I know that it's been this long, but you're welcome to stand with us.
I stand. I gotta go back.
Calisthenics, 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry for the delay, but thank you.
I'm so sad that we can't do And the rate we were just saying, we have no choice and they need the money for their my husband and I are band players. And so what we're gonna do.
You got me?
It's so sad because
That's good to know, though. Thank you for giving us the inside tip there. They have their drum line, and we invite them to do our electric light parade, and we do compensate them for doing that as well. So.
Yeah, I would know. There was
Oh, sweet.
we will actually do that sometimes.
Okay, thanks. I know the only place you have to go out clear over here to get up. Yeah. Yeah, big wainscot. I'm sorry. It's a good idea. Yep, we can do that. I'll make sure that happens. Okay, council, I'd like to reconvene this meeting. So all of those involved, could you please come back to the dais? Sorry for being so late back there. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and give our attention to Weston regarding this item, our rezone request.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And Council, before you tonight is a rezone request for a property to change the zone from CP1, which is planned neighborhood commercial and agriculture, to the MU mixed use zone. This property is located on Gordon Avenue and Fairfield Road, as you can identify here on the map. It is across from east of the post office and just north of an existing MU zoned property, which the council saw a year or so ago and is actually under construction. The applicant, Tyler Miles, is representing AIM Development and is here tonight representing the property. Utah State Code requires municipalities create a general plan that presents a plan that is for the present and future community needs, as well as the growth and development of the land of the municipality. Within the general plan, it identifies this area as within the Gordon and the Gordon and Fairfield Town Center. This town center encourages the mixed-use development to be located within this area, which includes townhomes, multifamily, mixed-use buildings, and commercial, encouraging this area to have strong neighborhood connections and walkability. This is just an identifying map of the area without the zoning layer on it. Mm-hmm. Before you tonight is a plan to put in a mixed-use project that will allow 2 commercial buildings to front onto Fairfield Road, which you see on the left-hand side. And then it transitions from that into townhomes. Those are 3-story townhomes that are across from those commercial buildings. The blue area is road dedication, which is required by the development. And then we cross the street moving east, which is moving right to additional townhome units that front the road on both sides. And as we move all the way to the east side of the property, or the very right side, they are 2-story townhomes. The property consists of open space with a clubhouse and a park area for the residents. East of the extension of the 60-foot public street bisecting the property, which is the center section, is required and outlined within the development agreement, which is associated with the packet that was provided to the council, which also includes the 35-foot right-of-way dedication, which is along the east, which is to the top of the property here. Townhome portions of the properties, the townhome portion of the property will include 18% open space. This includes on the 68 units total for townhomes. The conceptual exterior building elevations of the townhomes have been provided within the development agreement, as well as here to show you a general rendering. The buildings will consist of brick, cementitious board, and board and batten, alternating entry features with alternating roof features that will be used over the porches and upper stories. Final exterior building elevations will need to be submitted for the development plan that's reviewed by Planning Commission. Per the city's parking ordinance, each townhome unit is required to have 2.5 parking spaces. The proposed townhomes will have a 2-car garage with an additional 0.25 parking space used for visitors. This equates to 17 visitor parking spaces for the 68 townhome units. The development is proposing to have 19 visitor parking spaces. The commercial buildings are proposed to have 40 dedicated parking spaces located behind the commercial building. I'm just going to go back to the site plan so you can see that. The commercial buildings proposing 40 dedicated parking spaces. The city's parking ordinance requires the parking spaces be one for every 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. There's 10,000 square feet of required commercial space here. Based on the combined building square footage, a minimum of 30 parking spaces is required. This is just a landscape plan showing you the layout of the landscaped areas. And then I'm just going to go through and I want to just show you this is the black and white drawings of the same elevations I just showed you, as well as the commercial elevations. The development agreement that's accompanied with the project regulates and requires at least 10,000 square feet of commercial space. Commercial standards, design standards, architectural standards that requires 30% glass on the facade on each facade of the buildings. Residential design standards will be required to be consistent with the architectural style provided in the concept plans you've seen, and as well as it has a reference to the timing for construction of the commercial buildings and the installation of the townhome amenities, as well as the requirement for the public street dedications. On February 28th, the Planning Commission voted unanimously to forward a positive recommendation to the City Council to approve this rezone with concept plan to rezone from A, agriculture and CP1 planned neighborhood commercial to MU mixed use zone. In addition, the Planning Commission voted unanimously to forward a positive recommendation to the City Council to approve the development agreement. Staff supports the Planning Commission's recommendation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, council, time's yours.
Thanks, Mayor. Weston, are the townhomes for sale or for lease?
They will be platted for sale, but the company's planning on leasing them or renting them. So that's a similar product that we often see that eventually they could be sold. But my understanding is that they do plan on renting them.
On the back of the townhomes, they're the ones on the far right there, right?
Yeah.
How much room do they have to the fence?
There's about 25 feet there.
25? Mm-hmm. And then beyond the fence, I can't tell, are there any houses over there?
It's an agricultural property.
Okay. So we had a issue where the second story was looking down into the backyard, you know.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons those units are 2 stories is because they're close enough to an agricultural residential, single-family residential zone. They're required to be shorter.
Okay.
Looks like all of these units are rear entry as well. Is that correct?
They're all rear loaded. That's correct.
Not my favorite.
One of the benefits of the rear load, and understandably that it's not everybody's favorite, but it does facilitate getting utilities in a lot easier when we're dealing with a product like this.
Okay. Anybody have any other questions?
Thanks. Weston, I thought you said every townhome is required 2.5 parking spaces. Is that right?
That's correct.
But you said each one has 2.25. Can you?
It could just be the hour. I apologize if I spoke. Let me clarify. So each townhome is required to have 2.25 parking spaces.
Okay. So it's okay.
Mm-hmm. And that 0.25 is the visitor.
Okay.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Okay. And the drive, I'm going to ask this question because typically on these things, the driveway, are they long enough to accommodate a parked car?
No, and they're designed that way so that they're not parking sideways along it.
Okay. Any other questions, you guys, before we open this up for public comment? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion after my comment. Is that okay?
Sure. Go ahead, make your comment.
Just thinking back to Councilmember Morris's question, and we know all of the work that's done around home ownership and helping folks to have access to owning property. Just wondering if there's not really anything that we can do. We can do anything about that. But that would be my main drawback, is that these are already looking at being rented or leased. When we know that there is a housing shortage and renting is not necessarily helping folks who are in that situation. So I'd love to see an opportunity for ownership in these spaces. With regard to financing and things of that nature, I know that there are lots of things being done at the state level, and that's something that I would really like to see more of in this space. But anyway, that's the comment I have. I'd make a motion that we open the public comment.
Okay. I'll entertain that motion at this time. So anybody who wishes to address this governing body regarding the rezone requests, the time is now yours. You're welcome to step up to the podium. Make sure you state your name, and we'll listen to your concerns.
Hello, Mayor and council members. Chris Nielsen. My family, or my mom and my brother, are still on the agricultural property there to the north of this. So I did express a few comments at the planning commission. These are about the same. They're probably items that your great staff and the developers would work through as part of the design going forward. But a few things to mention. One is the traffic. This project, has 68 units, and it's going to bring trips. It's going to generate trips. The concept design has, an exit going out to the south, and then a new one to the west, and then of course traffic will be directed also to the 1150 North right of way. We would want the designers and the staff to look at, that intersection with 1150 North and Fairfield is already a bit chaotic. You have two entrances on the west side right there. The Fairfield Rehabilitation Center is an in and out, and it's right in the intersection. And then the post office entrance is right there. And then on the east side, you have, Fairfield, those single family units, they have driveways also. So there's a lot going on already right there, and we're going to add a bunch of trips to it. So I'd like to, look at mitigating that by encouraging or having the interior design divert traffic to the southerly and the westerly new access, And I'm sure they'll look at that. They'll probably do some sort of traffic study and see where best to try to send them. But right now there's two entrances going directly north out of the east half of this development. You can see they just go on to 1150 North. Sort of encouraging everything to go that way to the problem intersection is how I put it, rather than the two that appear to be better. So there's traffic item. The second one would be the 1150 right away there. The portion of it that abuts, the undeveloped property, the Nilsson property. How is that going to match? You can see it sort of lands halfway on the private lane. At one point, my mother said, well, tell them to put a fence there, put a barrier between the two, but it just doesn't make sense how you'd merge together at the existing public road. So have them, how are they, are they going to fix the grade so the gravel matches? Because we still want the gravel road there. It's where the ditch is and where the field comes to. Have them look at that. And how our private lane will connect to the public road now, that kind of thing. And then right there you can see, they're residents of this development are going to want to park on that 1150 North, and the concept drawing in the report shows 26 feet of asphalt to be right there, and that's two 12-foot lanes. It doesn't leave any room for parking. Is it going? How are they going to handle that? Is it make it no parking? Does it need to be wider? Look at that. Then drainage was the third thing. The hayfield still drains to that private lane. There's still a ditch there. Just have them look at drainage and picking up our drainage or not interrupting it. And then will the public right of way, we'll all drain south. We don't want any more drainage going onto the private hayfield. And those, drainage and traffic that I mentioned, I think these are things that your staff and the development will look at. But as adjacent owners that will be impacted, we just want to make sure they're heard. So that was all I had. Yep.
Thank you. Anyone else? Really? You guys have been here all night? We here for one? Okay.
I don't usually, if there's no need, I don't usually, and I have an hour and a half drive home tonight, so I'm just extending that problem. I'm Tyler Miles. I'm the applicant, been working with the Boyce family. My only comment would be, we've appreciated the staff. We went through a transition of some staff that caused some resetting, and they were very understanding of that, very helpful. And their input honestly has got us to a better product than what we started. So appreciate Weston, Cam, Lon, Whitney, my name was Shannon. So appreciate your staff. They're doing a great job. They're implementing some good practices, and we're excited. I would comment on Councilmember Edmondson's comment. We believe that rental housing, quality market rate rental housing, is in fact majorly helping with the housing shortage. So there's a lot of people who cannot buy homes right now. It's probably the worst time in my lifespan of housing and mortgage affordability. So it's a very neat product. So, and we're happy to provide it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, council, have any additional questions?
Yeah, maybe one for Weston.
Sure.
You mentioned the planning commission, and I mean, if it's not in the development agreement, the properties to the north, what have you decided to do or not do with Mr. Nielsen's comments?
Oh, as far as the roadway?
Yeah, the roadway, if it's not in the agreement, I
can identify that a little bit clearer. It's really hard to tell. There is I'll put the red dot on here. So there's a gravel road.
Yeah, we saw it on
connecting to there.
Yep.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're going to be required to build this roadway. So one of the things that the development will have to look at is how that drains. They're only doing half the roadway. And so when the rest of that roadway gets built, that would have to be constructed. And so typically when they construct that, the drainage would go towards their side. But that is something that they'll definitely have to look at. And they will have to look at the drainage from the other properties and negotiate, especially if there's water issues up in that northeast corner, where that's going to come from and how they're going to manage that. So that will come through the preliminary and final process.
Also, maybe just another comment. We typically just have the rezone, and we don't see you got a concept, you got a development agreement, you got all this ready to go, which is not typical. So, good job.
Thank you.
I got a question, and it might be the same one that Tyson might be. I'm not sure, but I'm curious as far as where does the runoff on that hayfield at the north end go to, as far as?
That would be a good question for them.
Yeah.
Yes, I do know that.
Okay.
They should be able to pick it up with their design, but it flows in a southwest direction. The whole small region does there. So anything that comes from the northeast hits that dirt road, and then it goes directly west down 1150 north. So, and there's not any inlets till you get to Fairfield.
Right.
There may be, again, this is conceptual. They're probably going to add some inlets to pick up the drainage.
Yeah.
But yeah, right now it's too much for one inlet.
Right. That's what I was driving at, that I could see where this could become a problem.
Yep.
As far as dealing with the runoff.
So I like what was mentioned. This is usually just a density thing, but they've shown enough development that it raises all these questions, but yet it's still a concept. But yeah, they'll need to look at that drainage. So.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councilman Robert?
Weston, will 1150 have curb and gutter on the north end, on the north side of it?
Yeah, so...
or does it now, I guess? I didn't drive it.
This side up here.
I'll be honest.
Is that what you're talking about?
Correct.
No, my understanding is that it doesn't have like a sidewalk. Honestly, I can't remember if it has a curb on it.
I don't think so.
But it does.
Yeah. Okay.
It does.
Okay. Okay. So that would hopefully mitigate the concern of water going north across the property. But I mean, it goes into the gutter, to that gutter, right? So that answers that. Also, what's our policy when we? Well, I guess this isn't abutting existing agriculture because the road's there, right? There's no change if a subdivision went in abutting agriculture property, we would put a fence up, I believe. The city would, or the city would require the developer to.
There will be fencing around it.
There will be on the north side of. I mean on the north side of that road.
Not on the
there
other
won't
side.
be.
Yeah, not on the north side.
Because we're not changing that. This development isn't changing that.
Correct.
Okay. But there will be on the east side.
Yeah.
Okay. And what's the zoning in the general plan for the east side of this? Is it R18?
For the east side of
this development.
The next two skinny parcels are within the town center itself.
Okay.
So these two sections here. And then that single-family subdivision that abuts the end of the town center.
Okay. Thank you.
Good questions. Okay, any more? If not, I'll bring it back around.
One more? I mean, since we're so far down what are the ideas for the buildings along Fairfield as far as commercial?
As far as like uses?
Yeah. I mean, have there been any?
They're looking at it.
Just be spec buildings?
Yeah, they'll be spec buildings. No, they're actively working on it. That's actually a really good question for the developer. In our discussions, they're actively trying to find users. The sooner they can find users, they'll start. My understanding is they'll start building for them. But again, more detailed answer would be good for them.
Personally, I got to say I like that concept there as far as putting the retail out front and making it separate from the dwelling units, because I know just kitty corner from here from this development, we've approved probably one of the first ones and realized that was, kind of a flaw in allowing the retail / homeowners to have their business right underneath their home, and it just didn't fly. So this is a great concept. So kudos to all of you guys that worked on that.
Thank you.
Okay, council. You want to go home yet? If so, I'll bring it back around and say I need someone to close the public hearing and take action on item A of our rezone request.
I move that we close the public hearing and that we adopt resolution 25-15 and ordinance 2506, the rezone request with concept plan and that's it. 1150 North Fairfield Road.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
It's been moved in second that we adopt the rezone request. So I'm going to start down here with Councilmember Roberts.
Yes.
Councilman Block.
Yes.
Councilman Morris.
Aye.
Councilman Smith Edmondson. Aye. And Councilmember Thomas.
Aye.
Okay, excellent.
And I move that we adjourn.
Okay. I will acknowledge that, and I do not believe we have another meeting after this. However, we got a plate full of treats back here to celebrate a birthday, and I'm sure there's enough for everybody here. So for you guys, last man standing, you guys all deserve a treat and be shared with us. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you again. I apologize for the lengthiness, but like I said, I'm proud of this.
Was there a vote on the motion to
deliberating.
adjourn? I don't remember if there was.